Hey everybody, welcome. Short notice on this one again. Thank you for joining though, I appreciate it. All right. So a lot of strangeness. And what I try to focus on, guys, is balancing my material between things that are tangible and known, yet unknown, I guess, like I did not that long ago earlier. Um, when I talk about things involving technology, things relevant to 4G, 5G issues, what technology evolutions are capable of doing. I do talk about those things, but I really don't enjoy doing that material as much as I like to get my head into topics that are a little bit more esoteric in nature, because there's just so few that are really talking about it in a way that I think helps us get to a place of greater understanding, as opposed to maintaining this sort of like la la land understanding of it that never really bridges the gap into something that we can translate into our daily experience, especially those of us who've gone through things that are very challenging to unwind. I really feel like most of what's out there relevant to timelines or things that are discussed as, quote, the Mandala Effect, are really just very elaborate ruses to maintain people into a certain type of static informational set. They really don't want people to understand this outside of a certain degree. If I feel like anytime I'm on the verge of discussing things on a deeper level that really help people on a broader scale, a lot of obstacles are placed in my way, or discouragement in general. This kind of happened to me um, before many times, actually, where right at a critical moment where I'm going to discuss something that's pretty significant, I receive just a lot of discouragement or negativity. And I just feel like, how are we going to really get down to fixing these problems if those of us who have a greater understanding of what the universal plasma field is and how it relates to our perception of space and time? It's challenging because it delves into some material where people don't always understand. Are we truly experiencing something that is of a how do we say it? Is this just an elaborate ruse on my perception? Is somebody using technology to create a perception involving timelines? And I've gone over and over again these types of things in my mind about, why is this happening? How is it happening? What are the intentions of the people that make this a reality, or entities, or whatever you want to talk about it might be? I don't know. I don't have an answer to that yet. I'm still looking, quite frankly. Um, what I do know, though, is that when it comes to our perception of time, I've just thrown all of my previously conceived knowledge sets out the window. I just don't even. I felt like I needed to start over from scratch, and I did that by studying energetics. Energetics really just discusses us as machines more, I guess. I don't like to call humans machines because we're not, but it more discusses how we process the universal plasma field as nodes, I guess you could say, that hive into one another, node to node, um, that we each bend the plasma field in uniquely individual ways, and we are all unique energy signatures within the larger plasma field. So yes, we are from a larger creator, a larger creation energy, I guess you could say, yet we do have our individual selves. We have our individual energy imprint within the universal plasma field. So I think this is where you get the whole notion of Adam's rib. Adam is from the earth, right? Within the Bible. I think that's where you get this. And then beyond that, you know, and welcome there, Coyote and Lisa. Thank you for joining. Beyond that, within the universal plasma field, what are the things that we're taught within, I guess you could say, the Bible or other religious doctrine, and how do they bridge into a belief in plasma as a science-based concept relative to what we know through religions like Christianity or perhaps the Quran or Judaism? A lot of different ways of discussing, the creation of what we all exist in. And this is something that I personally am challenged by over and over again relative to, who amongst us who understand it, once you gain an understanding of it, what is your role, if any, on this physical plane to bridging the gap between what you understand scientifically and what others have still yet to believe and understand that is important for them to understand, perhaps. This is where I guess, for me now, I understand why certain people do feel so passionately about delivering their form of God to others, right? Why they would go on, they would be evangelicals and, quote, spread the word. Like, I understand that now because, like, maybe I don't feel like a preacher or something like that, but yeah, I do feel motivated to discuss this at a deeper level so that people understand it at a deeper level. And I'm trying to think here, guys, about, because I have some material that I've already done that this gets a little bit into this topic so that I don't have to, and it has some visual slides in it. So I might want to put that on before I get deeper into this discussion. But let me piece together what kind of motivated this lately, this discussion. There seems to be there's a parallel that goes on relative to Project Rainbow. And that's why I put that up in my slide, because I wanted people to understand that even though I'm discussing this topic at a very esoteric level, I want you to know that I'm referencing military documentation. I'm referencing declassified documentation that I downloaded from the CIA, Central Intelligence Agency's Freedom of Information Act library called FOIA, FOIA. That's where I got my documentation relative to Rainbow. And that's when I began doing my own research as to what really is Rainbow, the Project Rainbow. Where is the real life, tangible bridge to what might have happened on the USS Eldridge? And what is that story? Those unfamiliar, there's a film and many film adaptations, at least 3 that I'm aware of, maybe 4, about the Philadelphia experiment. The Philadelphia experiment involved the USS Eldridge, cloaking technology involving high power electromagnetic fields to create the cloaking of a ship. And so it appears like what part of their process was, while there were humans on the ship, was to place them within this electromagnetic field on the ship and see what happens. Can they make both the ship and the people disappear? And if you follow the lore behind what happened out there, some say that this achieved nothing except for making people nauseous and sick. I could accept that was all that happened. That's possible. Yet, whenever something like that does happen, and perhaps within physical reality, maybe some people experienced exactly what I told you, nausea, and that's it. And that's all that they know that they experienced within this physical reality. I would also argue that with that high power of an electromagnetic field, knowing that the body is nothing but frequency, vibration, and energy, then yes, even within that individual who perceived the experiment that time and that moment, where they think of it as a static event that just happened then and they experienced it and they're like, well, I got sick, but that was all that happened. I would argue that even those people could have experienced during the time of that strong electromagnetic field somewhere along the lines of a parallel reality. It could have pushed them into resonance into a separate reality, slightly off tune from the one that we're in right now. And it's not really that, if you think about what I'm explaining to you folks, like about what we really are, if this is all just a universal plasma field, then what timeline manipulation has done, these experiments that involve, for example, CERN, I've often talked about, well, lately, I've been talking more about this concept. Hang on here. I don't have my whiteboard markers. I wasn't prepared. Sorry. I'll talk about this in a second, though, because I want to play an article on this before I do that. But you have things like CERN that have the ALICE facility. I talked about that a couple of presentations ago, where you're basically doing magnetic rotating cycles over and over again in a hole that's bored deep into the earth. There's one of these in Upton, New York state that a lot of people don't discuss. Nearly all the fingers are pointed over towards CERN. And I would argue, guys, if you've noticed, that CERN conspiracy theory was super popular 3 or 4 years ago. Now it's nearly non-existent. It's strange. It's like it all disappeared. I remember getting, like, even before conspiracy theories or whatever on these topics were really even that popular, I remember years and years ago, like 2008, 2009, 2010 timeframe. I can't remember when exactly around there, but I remember being part of a larger like social forum of people that met and like ate together. And like all of them were talking about the Hadron Collider, and they were, posting things constantly about it and everything and making jokes about it because Hadron sounds like something else. Ha ha ha. Everybody's, like a Beavis and Butthead in their own little universe, right? Or the kid in class that, giggles at every word. But yes, Hadron Collider, you can understand why that would be funny. But there's a lot of references to these Hadron Colliders within timeline films is all I'm noticing, guys. There's certain filmmakers that I think were asked, and I've tried to talk about this more seriously lately, and I received some positive feedback that that's a good thing to do. So I want to make sure those folks are happy relative to addressing that material too, because I think it's also important, and I don't want to neglect this topic. So that one of the reasons why, for example, yesterday my slide was stir crazy. I mean, I can't explain to you guys why that slide's relevant except to say that it just is. There's things that'll happen where I'm watching a film from 1980, like Stir Crazy, for example, that's, stars Richard Pryor, whose character's name is Monroe, by the way, in the film. Right there is a synchronicity I thought was super interesting. Richard Pryor is named Monroe. Okay, a lot of my research involves the Gateway experience and the Monroe Institute's documentation relative to the U.S. Army and the Defense Intelligence Agency's reports, right? They're all referencing things from the Monroe Institute, things involving hemispheres of the brain, which is also going to be relevant to what I'm discussing here today, all right? Because how is all this being brought into manifestation? Because I want to have a serious discussion about, let's just use, for example, I think what'll be valuable to do today is let's have a more scientific whiteboarded discussion about the film source code and what that technology is. And so spoilers, guys, if you've never seen source code, I might give away some key plot points, so I apologize. But, if you're watching these things for research anyways, then it won't be that big a deal. But I would just say if that's important to you for the plot or whatever, then go watch it, and then I won't piss you off. So spoiler alert for those who haven't seen source code, I'm just going to be giving away certain things in it to discuss the plot. And sorry to those of you who haven't seen it, but I would just say, I don't know. I think if this is an important topic to you, films that I think are kind of required viewing to understand the technology, one would involve the film source code. I think you really do have to sort of understand that. I think that Brian De Palma's movie, The Fury, is also kind of important just to see the first half hour so that you can understand psychic research facilities at that timeline better. I would also tell people even like the first half hour, or actually the entire film Exorcist Part 2, is also extremely relevant to these topics. Again, I understand these are all Hollywood films, but yes, some are there as they provide a lot of data and information, and some operate on two different layers. They're providing information in the sense that their plots are useful as metaphors or for direct discussions of technology. And in some cases, it does appear that filmmakers, actors or actresses, and or producers, writers were somewhat involved with Department of Defense projects that normally they would never want to admit that they're a part of, because it would almost seem like if you're an artist, like you're selling out to some larger interest, right? I understand why those people would want to keep that secret. So I'm not necessarily trying to like make this too big, right? You know, that's not a very popular thing for you to admit as an actor or an actress that you did something for a Department of Defense project, even though it's fairly common. That you left information behind, you know, as part of your character's role. So I think for most of these people, they do, as actors and actresses, most of these films are done straightforward. They're not aware of the larger issues that are going on. They really are just going in there and playing a part in a role or whatever, and then they leave the set. I think that's true for the most part. But there's absolutely producers within Hollywood that historically have been involved with things that work in tandem with defense projects, especially back in the nuclear days when they were building the bomb and they had to keep a lot of information secret. They learned how to keep secrets out in the open. One example I use a lot of times, maybe I can whiteboard this, guys. I'll do that. I'll wait for that, guys. Remind me to, if I forget, remind me to whiteboard the ducks, Huey, Louie, and Dewey, and relative to Donald Duck, and how that ties into things involving uranium and the nuclear industry and how it was communicated using Disney cartoons. Because think about it, guys. Back when we were building the bomb, there wasn't email. There wasn't any way to mass communicate quickly the way that we have today, where you could just go, okay, to every department head that has security clearance and has a filtered part on this server group, you're all going to get this email, but only you. Or the people that have access to this type of message, they have to log into a special system, a special access, and only view in a room where nobody can see them watching it. That kind of thing, guys. Anyways, I'm going to whiteboard this, but I need to show you some material about this topic first. Hang on really quick. Sorry, this one's working. That was probably slowing down my connection. All right. Oops. Oh, there we go. Whew. Thought I lost my screen there, guys. Sorry. All right. Sorry, things are moving a little bit weird for me here, so hang on. All right. Almost there, folks. I'll try to come up with some good music to sing next time. All right. Man, sorry guys, don't mean to be slow here on you. My windows are all screwing up. All right, I got it now. So this is my, it's only about a 10-minute article here that gets deeper into the Montauk and the Phoenix project connection. And then I'm going to bridge this material into things that I've learned more recently involving timelines. And I'll get deeper into that with the whiteboard here shortly. So I'll be right back. And this is the video. If you've seen it already, it's just going to be on for about 9 to 10 minutes. And you can come back. All right. Welcome back. Okay, this is part one, where we're going to talk about the connections to some of this data and how it correlates to the Montauk project. It's a book by Preston, Nichols, and Peter Moon. And the reason why I want to reference this book is because he makes very specific references to Wilhelm Reich's orgone energy experiments that took place decades ago. And it's very relevant to things that are happening today because it was studying a field that wasn't really defined clearly yet, called psychoenergetics, or just plain energetics, depending on your preference, I guess. This kind of ties into the Navy's experiments on the USS Eldridge, where they were trying to test cloaking technology using radio frequency. And so I think this book is worth just reading. Regardless of your opinion on the material overall, it's a very good reference guide as far as the specific frequencies, just to try to help understand maybe a little bit about how I came to some of the conclusions that I came to, because it's just another reference point for me to say, hey, I read this book. There's some truth here. I'm seeing some of these things myself. And this is me basically explaining the correlations I'm finding to some of the data that Preston Nichols presented in the Montauk project, specifically how it relates not only to Montauk, but also the USS Eldridge and what's known as the Phoenix project, which is different than what people associate with now as the Phoenix project. Oftentimes, I think it's kind of considered sort of like a mercenary project that was in Vietnam. And that's not what this is about specifically. This is related to something completely different involving radio frequency. So getting back to this slide really quick, honestly, this part here really isn't that big of a deal. I just kind of wanted to highlight this part here that it more or less demonstrates that during the Cold War, you had the U.S. government and USSR really keeping an eye on one another and constantly worried about what the other one was going to do research-wise. They were always trying to keep up with one another. So paragraphs 1 and 2 are more or less from the perspective of the USSR and how they saw their own research and perceived the U.S. And as I discussed in my last intro, that there's a lot of people that studied the Soviet Union's psychoenergetics program and the research they were doing into telepathy, and were very concerned that the U.S. was far behind. And so I just think this demonstrates that this was a mutual concern. So they were doing a lot of research as far back as not just 1972 when this report was written, but well before that. So I would just encourage you to read through this on your own. So how does this all tie in to today in real time, what we're dealing with now? Well, first, the book specifically, the Montauk Project, deals, I want people to kind of take a quick pause on this. If you have the book available to you, I would encourage you to take a look at these specific passages if you can find them, okay? Look into these pages on the book. And if you'll notice here, you'll see I just did a search by MHz for megahertz to see what I could find in relation to data that I found and located myself. I do research involving spectrum analysis. As I've told some of you, I'm a radio frequency engineer by trade, so I'm familiar with how to use a device like this that measures frequencies like these here. So, for example, a lot of times you see people on the internet saying, I've measured really strong EMF. Well, that's good, because that's energy, right? That says that you're seeing this spike, okay? But that's all it's telling you, is that you see the energy of this. It's not telling you that it's this, right? You might get this level right here. I might tell you how many decibels is within a certain range. So you might get, it's like it might peak out once it hits like 30
dBm, for example, or 40 dBm might be a threshold for reaching like a really high level. And then 73 might be more of a medium level, and then neg 100 might be a completely low level on the EMF meter. But see, that's all it's really telling you is based on some numeric value that's pre-programmed within that EMF meter. It's just telling you that it's strong or it's not strong, strong or it's not strong. And that could be coming from anywhere. That could come from your cell phone, your Wi-Fi, your Bluetooth, your laptop, anything. So my recommendation is if you're going to perform these type of measurements, shut everything down, right down to the breaker level before you do anything like this, if you want to call this type of data. That's my recommendation to all you people who want to replicate this and using one of these devices like an RF Explorer 6G spectrum analyzer to see what you can find on your own. But I would encourage people to try to replicate this because, and I would say you can do it with both these devices. This is really cheap. This device here will only run you like anywhere from 20 to 40, 50 bucks US, depending on your options and what kind of antenna or other type of things, like a little remote control if you want to. It's lots of different ways you can go. And then this here, it runs probably closer to between like $350 to $400 when it's fully optioned. And it does perform really nice spectrum analysis for a relatively low cost device. And so just to give you an example of what this looks like. So these are the signals that were associated with, I know I'm bouncing around here, guys, but bear with me. These are the signals that are associated with the Phoenix project. If you notice here, 403 megahertz. This is my measurement here. You can kind of get a relative look here how it correlates. Kind of see there it's around like a neg 40, neg 30, kind of spiking all around there. That's pretty strong. Now, I'm suspect of this, so I just want to make sure people know that. I really feel like this requires further verification from somebody just because this is kind of odd signal behavior. I'm not sure if I should trust this, if there's some harmonics going on here. It just looks bizarre to me. So then you have this signal here, which I generated, which if you want to see what it looks like live, he basically talks about how these radiosondes were sending out these sort of pulse signals, and you can see through here, he actually talks about pulse potential scalar, 7 megahertz is coupled, 1680 megahertz oscillator. Okay, see this? And he actually discusses the signal behavior. So I would say that if you're a person who maybe has a background in ham radio, amateur radio, I would really encourage you to look into this. And for those of you who are curious what this might look like in real time, this is a quick clip. I should say this is, it's not quite real time. It's set to max. So that just means that it'll, wherever the last peak signal was, it'll maintain that until a stronger signal comes around. That's a generic, guys. I'm not trying to like be super technical here. So all you RF engineers, back off. I'm not gonna play tech games here. Okay. This is just, this is for all audiences. Okay. So anyways, try to bounce around. I don't know what's going on here, guys. So this is an example of a radiosonde. So what you just saw earlier, that signal behavior, is indicative of a device like this, okay? Now, the premise of the radiosonde, if you read the book, is that they were sending these things up in like weather balloons, okay? So I've measured signals. The one you just saw there was around the neg 70s and everything. That's inside my home. You know, that's in building and everything like that. I've actually found that same signal in other parts of my home around like neg 55, which is quite a bit stronger. Now, if it's a weather balloon, it should be quite a ways up there, I would think. And these devices, I wouldn't think would generate that much power. But if you notice here, there's your signals, right? See how it says MHZ? So I'm not sure what to make of that. I'm just kind of throwing that out there, okay? And but this is my research, and I can actually show you many more slides and many more spectrum analysis that I've done. I have a very large database of these things, but I just don't want to bog this down with too much technical data, so we'll move on. So getting into telepathy and UHF. So why is this important? Well, UHF, actually, you know something? I think I'm going to save this for another section here. And yeah, we'll move on to this one. So anyways, we'll pick up on part 2 very shortly, telepathy and UHF. Thank you. All right, hello. Just wanted to throw this in here as a supplement. I've done these measurements before, but this is done a little bit differently. So I'm using a software called IR.
No, I'm not. All right. So I wanted you guys really quick to see this, all right? So when people talk about, you know, how is it possible to do timeline manipulation? How does one timeline have a conversation with another timeline? Because cycles of the earth, we're in a rotational cycle, and we're also in a vibratory frequency relative to the earth brainwave. So the earth is about 7.83 hertz, and select portions of the population idle close to earth resonance. Not everybody, just certain portions of the population. Now, that doesn't mean that others can't be trained. So what I mean to say, folks, is that, yeah, certain people are, quote, adept. They can do these things. They have natural psi ability. I would argue natural psi ability is just simply that these people are way closer to the cycles and rotations of the earth, that there is an interaction that occurs between that grouping of the population relative to what occurs within the rotation of the earth. They can create events. They can make things happen. They can bend the plasma field more readily. They're more consistent with shaman. They're more consistent with, you know, whatever you want to say, mystics and things of that nature. Yeah, all of that. Okay. Now, a person over here, right? I know I'm going over some similar material from a couple days ago, but I need to like do this as building blocks, folks. So if you haven't seen my material from not the last one, but the 2 before that on, you know, the universal plasma field energetics, it's kind of important because you'll understand this better. But basically, if you think about this as another brain, right? Another person over here. Let's just say this is past. This is future. But same DNA, same person. Now, I say same DNA and also same person because, hang on, this is way too big. Let's make this more like a head. All right. Now, because this is all within a universal plasma field, this is all occurring, okay? And so effectively, what you have emitting from the brain is an electromagnetic field that, because your hemispheres are kind of operating energy cycle wise, very similar to the way past and present work, you're forming your structure of reality this way. You have your pineal gland in here. You've got your eyes right here. Okay, what are all these 3 dots? Your third eye is your pineal gland. The concept works as follows. Simple as that. You're taking energy, sun, okay, you're inputting the energy from the sun surrounding whatever into here, goes back to your pineal gland. You form this prism. That triangle is in synchronization to hemispheres on your brain. And so you have something that's consistent with the flower of life in circular grids. Let me put that material up really quickly. So if you're not familiar with the concept of the flower of life, I want you to see this. And now think about this relative to brainwave and hemispheres. And what I'm talking about here, all right, so think about this and then this. Think about this relative to right there. Okay, so a sphere. And how do you get this ball that we live in, this earth, from a whole collective hive mind? How does one begat the other, and yet one is the other and one's not the other? Which came first, the chicken or the egg, right? Which came first, the chicken or the egg? We're getting down to this is it, folks. We're really getting down to creation and everything involving the Bible, really. That's why I find this exciting, because I don't believe that this is in competition with anything involving commonly accepted religious doctrine. I think it is very much in harmony with it. I think it matches it to a large degree, not mirrors in any sort of nefarious way. I think it helps explain what the Bible was trying to explain, perhaps what Jesus was put on earth to explain, and perhaps what other religious leaders from other religious doctrines that have been across the world that perhaps are just echoes and reflections of the same doctrine. And that's why they all share so much in common, is because it's really just history repeating, and then different groups going, no, but this is the way it happened. No, but it happened this way. Well, in all actuality, guys, it's like, did it happen one way? Did it happen the other way? Maybe it happened in both timelines. And because what we're really existing in is competing timelines, that, yeah, Preston Nichols, his research really helped me understand this, is especially involving more sophisticated forms of what some people call Mandala Effect, because I kind of accept that the man Preston Nichols, who wrote those books, did experience his realities without it being a, quote, delusion. I don't think that it was a delusion. I think that a lot of what happened with Preston Nichols and Peter Moon and what is it, I can't remember I always screw up his last name, Balbic. I apologize, I'm getting that wrong. But Preston Nichols and Peter Moon wrote a few of these books, and I was going through Music of Time again, something that I had recommended to me a while back, and that I hadn't really taken in and absorbed fully. I'd mostly spent most of my time focused on Montauk experiment book and things involving, Phoenix and the USS Eldridge and all the lore surrounding that, because he had so much specific data, like I showed you there. I'm wired that way, where when I see all the information, I go, wow, this person's talking about devices. They're talking about frequencies. They're talking about something that I can actually go research. And if I ordered one, I could even hold one of those things in my hand and find out what it really does. That was so refreshing to me, because up until that point, nothing anybody ever did within my universe ever brought me closer to like something that was tangible and real. I was always really frustrated about the type of data that I was getting. I felt like it kept me too much in la la land and not enough in actually being able to do something that's measurable and provable relative to these concepts. Then once I got past that, I just realized that so much of the data that's out there really doesn't fully explain it, or is just plain freaking bogus, for lack of a better word. You just have to like really get past everything, get your own gear sometimes, and just spend some time away from things like I did. I kind of cut away from most of the communities that were close to these topics, and I just did my own research. And what I wound up learning was that all these things basically just started to find its way to me. I didn't really have to look that hard for it anymore. I just sort of waited for the information to arrive. Meditation is largely how it works, when you're in the middle of a situation and everything, just basically kind of, especially when I'm in negative psi energy environments, especially like Las Vegas, which was incredibly negative and incredibly, just a lot. Like you would expect, guys. Look, I don't necessarily think that because a place is Sin City that it's going to have negative energy in the classic sense. I think that there's, some degree of whatever within the human experience where, I guess that's part of it, right? And then perhaps people need to be able to experience it safely. I don't know. I'm kind of over it myself. I don't really need to spend time immersed in those environments. So I was very glad to get out of that area for that reason. But the thing I learned about staying in these negative psi energy environments for extended lengths of time is it really does fine tune a person's ability to get through challenging situations that were very difficult for me to manage. Because once you begin to understand this, you're kind of opening yourself up to a whole new universe, whether you wanted that or not. It's just the reality of it. It's there's really no turning back once you've opened up the Pandora's box of timeline manipulation. You're there, you've done it, whether you accept it or not. You can pretend it didn't happen and everything like that, but the evidence of it is everywhere when it comes to the way it's bending time forward and backward. And so the thing that I've learned is once you have a pretty good sense of how it works and you fine tune your abilities as an intuitive communicator, if you have that going on, that you can kind of master the ability to sort of like just receive information from yourself directly. How would that work? It does work. It involves DNA and it involves frequency. So really, folks, you basically are frequency, vibration, and energy. So let me get this out of the way here. But don't forget this when we're talking about these things involving brainwave, hemispheres of brainwaves, and how you hive into other brainwaves, because really everything we're discussing here with these concepts, it ties into this whole circular grids, and basically pineal gland to pineal gland, you keep adding and adding and adding and adding. And that's how like the earth basically gets structured and maintains this physical reality. And so, when people like the notion that you would want to affect people's brainwave or affect earth frequency excessively, I think you're opening yourself up, I guess, to this Pandora's box, folks. What I'm telling folks out there, that if you're in the government or you're in intelligence services and you thought you could just do things like source code without it causing harm, accessing timelines in and of itself is opening up a Pandora's box. Getting the information and processing it within your timeline, it's quantum physics. You're being exposed to it. You can't one thing will always lead to another. You understand what I'm telling you here? Even if you're just getting, like, I guess you could say, predictive type timeline type things where you think that you're actually getting information that's going to help you do, like, quote, pre-crime type things. Not so much. That in and of itself is programming future timelines, if you understand what I'm telling you. Once you're getting into that level of what you think is prediction. What you're actually doing is programming reality. You're programming the future. You're delving into that. And this is where it's extremely challenging for everybody that's kind of gotten to the point where they get what I'm talking about here. They're like, all right, Gabe, I get it. My brain is around this many hertz. Fine. I've got unique whatever plasma fields. Big deal. Fine. Whatever. All right. But if you're experiencing anomalies, it's because you're tapped in closer to the fact that the Earth is basically existing the way this is. This is just like your brain being formed through the 3D prism. It unpackages the energy fields that come into your eyes. They merge into your pineal gland, rotate. So this, you notice how this right here is a lot like the shape of your eye. So your third eye, the field surrounding it, is not unlike the actual physical shape of your eye. The energy field, you understand why they call it the third eye? It's because what you're really doing here is you're bridging your physical energy inputs into the metaphysical, what you're doing as thoughts become things. Let's just call it what it is. Yeah, we can say that, it's manifesting reality. We can use all that fancy terms and all that, right? That we all love so much. Gaia, Mother Earth. Does that help? I haven't done a Gaia, Mother Earth in a while. Here you go. Here you guys. Gaia, Mother Earth. Okay. There you go. Because we are talking about Gaia, Mother Earth, are we not? All right. So what I'm telling you is the reason why this winds up being the big globe that it is because we're really using that circular grids. All of us are just going boom, 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 boom with our brain waves, and we're vibrating brainwave to brainwave this into resonance. The Earth itself. How did this get here? Because really within this Earth, guys, I'm just telling you, it's really this. Hopefully that makes sense a little bit. So you see how we're going brain to brain, past, future, right? Past, future. This is the Earth a little bit. Sorry, I'm not trying. I promise you, I'm not trying to be crude here. This isn't like, I'm not drawing things or whatever. This is the pineal gland. So what I'm telling you is that it's a little bit like the Earth is basically the reason why it's 60-70% water is because what we're vibrating into physical reality is this Vesica Pisces of the energy fields that exist from these rotational fields. So yeah, the Earth looks like a sphere, it's shaped like a sphere, but in all actuality, what's physically vibrated into resonance is closer to like like an eye-shaped thing, or I used to call it a soggy waffle because that's kind of what it winds up being, like this huge soggy waffle that's spinning around with the water around it because it's getting soggy from this, sorry, because it's water represented to us, right? But it's plasma, okay? And it's all being whisked into frequency from like billions or millions of whatever people that are on Earth are all bringing this into physical resonance. So sorry, that's a little bit sloppy here. So let me, change this back. All right. But still, let's keep up the fact that we have this, right, going in these fields. So I want to keep at least this concept intact of the Vesica Pisces. So you go, okay. So that's still in there. Sorry, guys. I know it's lopsided. You know, I'm doing my best here. I'm not an artist. So how are the timeline manipulations occurring technology-wise? What is making this all a reality, and how would it even work? Like something like source code. That's where I really wanted to get into with this, so that I'm not just sitting there going blah blah blah, brains, prisms. Okay, let's get real here. What's really going on? You know, because it's a little freaky, and I'm trying to help people understand. And it's never me. I'm not trying to like play the wizard and freak people out with all the wizardry that's going on. No, I've just learned that somebody knows about how all this works, and they're taking advantage of this link, you know, that exists here. So hang on, I'm going to make this head a little bit smaller. All right. Sorry, I want this to be a little bit more. There we go. Okay. So what's making this link work is that just like the Earth's rotation is, you know, constantly occurring, the cycles of time within our perceived reality is constantly occurring. So hemisphere of the brain relative to Earth rotation, relative to your past, to your future. And then what we're existing in right here is present. So past, present is our physical reality here on this physical plane that we're sharing with everybody else, and in our future. So in all reality, when you think about it, guys, since it's all like a universal plasma field, again, guys, I'm not an artist. All right, I'm doing my best. Hopefully this all makes sense though, based on you get the core concepts, even if I'm not doing a very good job drawing it out. So if you think about it, you've got 8 hertz coming from here. That goes into the Schumann resonance where it's in the rotational cycle, creating this pattern here. Okay. So you have a bridge here to take you from pineal gland to pineal gland. Here's what's trippy, folks. How do you know that the reason why source code and LookingGlass exist isn't because somebody from another timeline didn't just look in at this very whiteboard and learn it, and that I learned it from another timeline, and they learned it from another timeline, learned it from another timeline, because space and time do not exist. See, it's all perception. It's all plasma. It's all being bent. It's all just plasma fields being bent. So I had to start to reevaluate how I perceive reality. I had to completely reevaluate how I thought of how things can work and what can be done or should be done, if anything, relative to timeline manipulation. If it's already happened, do we need to correct timelines? Is it best to leave them uncorrected? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. That's why I feel like this data set, this collection of information that I've been trying to get more people to understand at a deeper level, also requires a little bit of a working group that get it and can research it. And again, guys, what I would like to do is, I'm not trying to be exclusionary at all. I don't want this to freak people out. What I would hope that this information does is make them go, aha, I understand now. I'm not freaked out. I get it. Now what? All right. So then that's the now what part. To me, this is very co-creative and very energy balancing in nature. It's one of those things that it's a handshake. It's a relationship in a way. It's something that it can't just exist independently. It's something that you really must balance against others. It's important once you grasp this concept, because I can promise you guys, some of the technology that's existing out there, if you think about this as Earth rotation and that we exist within the Vesica Pisces on this land mass, and that this is all water surrounding it. Okay, 60-70% water, 30% land roughly. Then you've got what over here? Same thing within your brain and body. Hemispheres of the brain surrounded by the very same dynamic. So again, one is a reflection of the other. Adam's rib, man is of the earth, right? Why? Because that's what this is communicating. This is not in competition with anything involving religious doctrine. I would argue this proves it. This proves exactly the concepts that were being expressed in the Bible. But what are they going to do? Give you this huge fucking whiteboard and say, sorry about my language, guys. I really did not mean to drop an F-bomb there. I'm trying to be nice with that today. So I apologize. But did you actually expect them, though, to draw a whiteboard? But no, they're going to give it to you in this really basic way, because if you think about it, part of the process, I think, is to unpackage this data to the human mind. It's part of the spiritual path to get a person to a greater sense of not just spiritual awareness, I guess, but I think as part of their path, their scientific path, and bridging spirituality to science. When you can bridge the spiritual to the scientific, it opens up a whole new universe, because this is really energetics 101. Okay. And that's all I'm trying to explain to people, is that you need not, if you're religious or you're spiritual or you're a person of that nature, you need not fear energetics, because it actually supports the more esoteric concepts that I've been, as a person that was historically an atheist or an agnostic. And I required scientific rigid evidence for me to believe anything. I'm helping you explain, guys, that now it opened me up to spirituality in ways that were never possible before, because once I understood the science of energetics, I understood ancient DNA. I understood ancient civilizations, and I began to understand things in the Bible and how it relates to everything. So here's the deal, folks. What we're talking about here entirely is a bridge between timeline to timeline, how basically you structure your reality currently, and there's a bridge involving Earth frequency that goes back to the past, to the future. And so, yes, it is possible for people dynamically to be sending information forward and back, forward and back, forward and back. And so once a person from the future is notified to something on an existing timeline or a past timeline, then they can then use this same cyclical process to continue sending information to the past. I've seen so much evidence of this now that I cannot sit around and pretend that I didn't see it, or it did not exist, or whatever. Way, way too many things going on. And it's very specific to me, the information that I get. It's like ways that, like, these people are telling me, like, dude, we saw you on another timeline giving these presentations. And I'm getting that as information, that there were people that were in Hollywood, that were in defense projects, that knew that I would be doing these presentations from another timeline. And so, yeah, there were people, how do I say this? So you've got people from here that are going, guys, let's just say this is like 20 years from now, right, where they've got this shit down to an art. Sorry about my language. They've got this whole thing working perfectly. All right. Now they're able to send messages here to 2021, whether people here believe it or not. That's a whole nother thing. Most people would be like, no way this is happening. No way this is happening. I can't believe it. I must be going through a delusion. Well, I think maybe some people are, and there's definitely technology that could, you know, make that happen. So I don't want to tell everybody that this is what you're experiencing, because yeah, you may have something else going on entirely. There's technologies that can literally just import sound into the person's head. That's not what this is. LookingGlass and source code, that's not how that works. This is literally a link that involves extremely low frequency hacks to where you can ping this pineal gland, the energy fields within the eyes, the pineal gland. I've often told people you can kind of get a sign that I've had a lot of it done, because I have the darkness around the eyes very frequently. Again, sometimes I'm just lacking sleep. That does happen, because I'm just kind of like that. When I'm thinking about things, especially, I tend to like spend a lot of time, you know, putting these ideas on paper or whatever, or putting them into a notebook, or fleshing them out into a documentary or whatever it is that I do. But yeah. So let's talk about a little bit like how this is really, what do you want to call it? Source code or whatever, you know. So what is source code within the movie? Source code within the movie talks about that there's an 8-second window . All right. So source code, the film, you might want to watch this if you're looking for greater information. I have my personal feelings on source code is that it probably, whether the people are aware of it or not that we're involved entirely, that there's a deeper level behind, you know, how that worked. Hang on really quick, folks. So within the film source code, it required a person that was sort of like half dead. All right. And I would recommend people watch that for a lot of reasons. Again, there's things that are communicated in it that I feel like what it does is it kind of serves as a synchronization, like a timeline synchronization film. I think it's going to, for certain people, it'll hit them in a way that, how do I say it? It'll synchronize them with them in ways where they'll realize that there's no way to explain what's going on at that particular time, aside from that it was designed that way, that there was people that were literally reaching out to them. And so I think that the reason why that might be happening, or you may find that it's happening to you, is because you've opened that doorway, and so you're receiving the data, and they're trying to get this information to as many people from one timeline to another. So both past and the future, there's lots of people that are aware of how this works. They've been informed. The difference is the people from the past don't yet have the evidence. You know, they're still having to review everything and hope and find out. So like in 1980, for example, say some of these film directors were involved and producers were involved with dropping clues into films for people like us to see. At that time, what would incentivize those filmmakers, those television producers, those musicians to add things to their lyrics and their songs, or to the scripts of their films, or to the scripts of their television series, or just to simply add visual clues involving product placement or involving other things within films that are designed to synchronize. And I'm not talking about just anything, guys. You'll know when this is happening because it'll slap you like, whoa, it's a cold splash of water, an ice bucket, whatever you want to call it, of a reality check that perceived reality is in fact not what it used to be, and there's no turning back. Look, folks, we ascend, and ascension shouldn't scare you. This is part of ascension. Reality is not what it used to be. Yet what some would seek to do within physical reality is convince you that something that really is as ascension and a pathway to what you might perceive as heaven on earth, they would like you to program it into purgatory or hell. And please don't let them do that. That's what we're dealing with here. You see, as things begin to change, especially your ability to adapt your brainwave, part of ascension really is adapting your brainwave to where you're more, I think, in tune with the Schumann resonance, that you begin to become in more consistent harmony with the earth. You intuitively receive messages from the earth and you transmit them to the earth because you're literally operating brainwave to brainwave. Human brainwave at 8 hertz, or roughly 7.83 hertz relative to Schumann resonance, which is around the same. That would include, because here's the thing, guys, there's conflicting data on this. I've heard other researchers talk about how that the water frequency that they resonate at is closer to, like, 42 42,000, what is it? Oh man, 42.6 kilohertz, if I'm not mistaken. I do believe that's around the number that they say is around where water frequency is. I could be incorrect on that. I'm pretty sure it's in that 40 kilohertz, 40 to 43. I believe it is, though, 42. The meaning of life, as the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy says, water frequency 42, 42 equals dB, decibel. You can go all kinds of places with that one. But I think Douglas Adams had a much larger idea in mind about what he understood, but there would really be no way to just say it to you. So maybe that was like their way of saying, like, yes, it's all about Bell's theorem. It's all about dB, decibel. So this concept that I'm explaining to you here is very much in relation to Bell's theorem also. One thing is always a harmonic, right, to another. Everything references another thing. So that's true of your individual self. You as your future self, as your higher self, you as your past. So your future as your higher self, I guess you could say, you keep ascending beyond that, right? Because you keep going and going and going into the future, right? Presumably. And so as your current self within here, and so, maybe the thing to do is just to briefly, we are within the present here, guys. So you can think of this whole thing that you're in right now as the present. Is the reason why you perceive this globe is because you are it, you're in it, and you're making it, and it's making you simultaneously. You're not God, but yet God is living through you. You are living through God as this representation on this physical plane, which you're creating with everyone else here that's existing on this perceived physical plane that we're all vibrating into frequency together. And that's why this is so compelling. Why would there be maybe some higher divine source that reminds us from time to time that as much as, we are able to affect this, that, we shouldn't get too big for our britches, as they like to say. They warn us, or they make sure that we know that if, we gain too much influence in certain cases and it's unchecked influence, that they're concerned about what a person might do overall. And this is something I've been reading up about a lot lately. I've been studying. Again, I share this frequently, guys, that I gain a lot of inspiration, especially lately, from Valery Uvarov's work, a Russian researcher that does a lot of excellent work relative to pyramids and understanding ancient pyramidal structures, and helped me understand things that I had intuitions about. Really formed a more direct explanation that was scientific and helped satisfy my science-based mind, because I really require information with numbers applied to it. I want to know what brainwave is. I want to know what earth frequency is. Somebody tells me there's chakra points. I'm like, all right, what are they? What do they measure at? How do you know what those are? And then I had to get equipment that did all that too. So now I'm measuring all the chakras in ways that actually talk about energy, biofields. I'm using the GDV system to actually learn how everything interconnects as a bioelectrical machine. What we all exist as is frequency, vibration, and energy. Then there's ways of measuring your energy, input, output, rather. Yes, input and output. Yeah, that would be true. So body voltage, there's this thing I'm using called BioWell. It's a gas discharge form of Correllian photography that is actually showing like a connection between a lot of these things that I'm discussing here. It not only will measure like your biofield to where you can measure like, the amount of electricity you have running through different portions of your body and chakra system, but it also does environmental readings, which is really compelling. And I've done those. I haven't done them lately. I've been a little bit on a hiatus here, but I'll be getting back into doing the environmental measurements very soon and sharing those with you very soon, because you need to see the Sputnik sensor doing some actual environmental readings, because it's pretty fascinating to show how individuals as well as events within weather and things can affect these readings. And so it's a little bit like when people claim that there's orgone, and orgone can be, affected one way or the other. This is a kind of way of proving that out. It's a way of showing that an individual's electrical field, bioelectrical field, and changes, that biocommunication really is a thing, and that you'll be able to verify why certain people are strong biocommunicators relative to these types of measurements that I'm in the process of performing and doing verifications on. It basically proves out a lot of what I'm talking about here if you get deep into Correllian photography. Why do I talk about that? It's because really everything that's going on right now, folks, is the bridge between what's spiritual and scientific, what we accept as physical and what we talk about as metaphysical concepts involving God. And, it's important to understand it at that level so that you can, that you can understand your faith better, but also so you can see why some people have such they feel such a strong need, I think, especially to anchor their existing reality into a more religious structure. I understand why that is. I think the reason why that appeals to people that are even non-religious in nature or were never raised with religion is that they have this tendency to, how do I say it? It's hard to accept that something like this is happening, I think, because you've never felt that type of connection to some type of higher source. You've always required evidence. And so when you begin getting these downloads that are also providing you with evidence, it's providing you with information, that's a little bit of a wake-up call that this is actually, like, that's what it takes to wake up people like me. I had to get a download that happened about 5, 6, actually more like 6 years now, that it was that I got this thing called the Ka Codex, K-A-H Codex, that it was like just this whole series of informational sets that was downloaded to me that involved everything I'm talking about here. I just didn't understand it yet. And so it was given to me as information. I put it all down in notebooks. I've been sharing copies of it for years with people. So, I mean, it's a known thing. I put it on my interview with Miles Johnston on the Basis project that I did in 2016. So it's documented that I've been talking about all these concepts for a long time with, different people, both publicly and privately. I really wanted these things to be understood at a broader scale. I wanted more people to get it, to be discussing it at a deeper level, because I hear these terms like LookingGlass floated around a lot. I hear a lot of people demonstrate concerns about CERN facilities and things like that, but we very seldom get into what are the positive aspects of how this could all be used. And so I don't want to like dismiss that, folks, because there's a tendency to like say to everybody that folks in Hollywood are all evil, and anybody that did these Masonic things involving the coded 33s and everything were these bad people. So let me explain something to you folks, guys. There's really nothing evil about the 33 concept if you really get what it's talking about. And I'm going to give you a quick explanation. They used it for alignments, oftentimes, pyramidal alignments of relevance. So when they had communication beacons, for example, I can give you one tangible example of this. So you've got a pyramid. Right? You guys kind of know basic orientation, right? North, south, west, east, okay? But do you know that that's 0 degrees? That's 180 degrees. This is 90 degrees. This is 270 degrees, right? So the basics of the directions, okay? You guys understand that? So I can just eliminate that. Just trying to do the basics here, guys. So 0 degrees is north, south is 180, east is 90. So I'm going to be talking about these angles here briefly. So within the orientation from the top, say you're on top of this pyramid, you're at the very top of it. What I've learned is these ancient pyramidal structures that exist globally have alignments that are a little bit off from what most people accept as this or that or whatever. So in some cases, I've noticed that they'll have an angle where they orient it to where this pyramid structure aims at 33 degrees. Or it goes this way at 303 degrees or 330 degrees or even 303, 330 are just two examples, right? And so if you're at the top of the pyramid and you look off yonder, so say this is on, on the earth. I get it, right? But let's take into consideration whatever, right? Then that 33-degree alignment oftentimes will take you to many different other locations of religious or spiritual or esoteric significance that are other type of structures. So in this case, it might go to like, I don't know, a ziggurat. And then from there might be another 33-degree beacon that'll take you to like, another pyramid. This might be Egypt. Don't take these literally, guys. These are whatever, This one might be a Bosnian pyramid. And again, then you'll find, and actually with the Bosnian pyramid, I can give you some real alignments because that's an actual one that I have off memory. But you see the point here. What this winds up doing is linking a whole bunch of sites together in a way that you would have to be familiar with this 33, 303, 330-degree dynamic to even understand. They're all linked. How it happened, I don't really know, but I find these connections all over the place when I do my map research, okay? Bosnian pyramid in particular is really trippy because here you'll find, the pyramid. And I can't remember, but it's either, I think it's this one here. I'd have to look it up, and I can even show you guys how this all works. But one of these alignments is either 303 or 330 degrees. But this winds up going thousands of miles. It winds up aligning to Joseph, Oregon, Wallowa Lake. That's just one example. And so I've noticed that Wallowa Lake in Joseph, Oregon is a really esoterically relevant location. It aligns with the Altai Pyramid in Russia. It aligns with the Bosnian Pyramid. It aligns with multiple Freemasonic lodges on their 33, 123, 213, 303, 330 degree lines. It aligns with, God, I mean, so many different things Wallowa Lake aligns with. I could do I have done a whole presentation on it. I just don't want to play it right now, guys, but you can find that in Energetics. I did it in a few different articles, but Energetics 10 gets into the whole love frequency aspect of it, because that's kind of what all that research ties into. Wallowa Lake, it just seems to be this strong energy location in Oregon that has universal alignments. They're all over the world. Some are in near like China, Hong Kong, Macau area. Some are in Russia. Some are in and even the one in Russia that aligns with Wallowa Lake, it also aligns with Lake Mead in a very precise way that's really trippy. Also, you want to talk about what are we really existing in? That's a whole nother realm of research that I would have to talk about in detail, guys. But anyways, so I'm just trying to help you guys understand that the whole 33 aspect is not always negative. Okay. So when you see them used in films, when you see people like stressing 33 over and over again, yeah, there would be some that would seek to always tell you that that's a negative thing. They're always trying to program ancient and esoteric concepts that, you know, oftentimes I've learned have very benevolent activities as their origins. They would seek to program into negativity or to saying that it's satanic or something else like that, or it means sacrifice, it means death and that kind of crap. And I've just learned that the people that really thought this through back thousands of years, these ancient civilizations, I don't know, maybe if you want to call them angels, if you want to call them ETs, if you want to say whatever that is, that's up to you. I'm not here to tell you how to interpret what these people are. But yeah, different groups call them different things. And in Uvarov's research, he even talked about this group, the way that they exist on Earth is explained in Genesis 6:4, involving the Nephilim, whatever you accept that to be. And that they possess abilities that others don't, and that they will populate the Earth and they'll be here a little bit like watchers. They're extensions of God in some way. They're not gods themselves or anything like that. They're just a little bit like eyes of God to make sure that things, I guess you could say, run properly, and that people are given information and that they gain awareness in ways that are not corrupted. But over and over again, they learn that humanity is a little bit tragic and sad oftentimes, and they tend to go negative. They tend to pick negativity. They choose psi energy environments of a negative design because it's easy. They always go for the route that is in their perception. It's easier to scare people than inspire them to love. It's way easier to put the fear of God into people instead of inspire them to do better. And again, folks, that's one of the reasons why I make constant appeal to us to not program the intentions of those who might have been involved with some of these timeline things all in the same batch. I think you have a mixed bag of people that were doing it like, like, let's exploit this 33 thing. It's like they know that it's a shortcut that they can ride into people's perceptions to get them to think one way or the other in extremes. And so the game is a little bit like trying to say, like, get as many people to automatically think that these angles on these pyramids are boo, sacrifice, negative, death, when in all actuality, death is a perception. Energy lives on forever. And so whether you choose to believe that you can look, I think to some people, the concept of dying and merging into a new light body without their memories intact is a very beautiful, blissful concept. And they don't want to experience like an eternal life cycle. They don't want it. And so I kind of understand why some people would take that perspective on it, right? But I really do believe that once this is understood at a larger level, that it will actually change life cycles. That once people actually understand what plasma is doing, and they choose the POR spectrum of radiation more frequently, because we need people to do it right now, and they're going to, just so you know, it's not like we have a choice. Humanity is going to be naturally and organically drawn towards positive orgone radiation spectrum events. They are going to be drawn towards it naturally because humanity as a whole is going to begin and is beginning and is recognizing this imbalance exists here on this physical plane, and that we are creating it. And so it is our responsibility, especially those of us who get it, to not interpret every messaging that it comes in as legit or as valid. Sometimes, guys, astral communication is just something entirely separate that has nothing to do with actually what a person intended, but it's sort of like a merging of like what you personally, would like to bring into manifestation versus what's possible. And I've learned that about astral communication, especially. It's really strange, but see, you can't dismiss it as insignificant. It's very significant. So I don't dismiss other people's astral experiences at all. I just try to understand better, like what brought them into reality, or that whatever into reality. And I learned that it's actually a pretty powerful thing. Sometimes you can have an astral experience because it kind of involves these concepts of tapping into energy, human brainwave, plasma fields, how you're interacting with what? These ancient energy structures that exist as, sometimes they look like naturally formed pyramids, but they're actually generating energy. Where is that energy going? Well, these are plasma fields when you think about it. And these plasma fields can travel, right? All right. So I would argue that when you put something like, the King's Chamber, and then you got the Queen's Chamber, and they tie all these things in together. This isn't the Bosnian pyramid, by the way. Sorry. This is, but it isn't, right? I'm using a new example here of, because the Bosnian pyramid doesn't have all this going on. It's a different structure. So sorry. Let's just talk really quick about like maybe a Giza pyramid, like what might be going on here. You got Queen, King, it's connected. You got this zigzagging thing going on. Underground sends energy, rather 7.83 hertz. It brings it into here, travels up, goes through the Queen, goes through the King. So I would argue, what are the King and Queen bringing into this? That's Ka, Ba. The male and the female. And so what were they doing with the pyramids? Something you got to think about. You see, were they hacks, or are they just as much a part of our reality as everything else? Who put these things here? How long have they been here? What part did they play in structuring our reality, these pyramids? Because that's what they're doing here. They're bending plasma fields. And that's why ones that are positive in nature are pretty much damned universally. So like the ones that are in Giza, if you study Uvarov's research, they'll tell you that some of the ones that are in Giza are enormous generators of negative psi energy, and they can even be harmful to some people if they stay in them for extended amounts of time. They can actually give, a person can leave that situation and then develop illnesses later on and not even know where they came from. They didn't even realize that it's because they maintained their physical body static in a negative psi energy location without having an awareness about what they were doing. It's really negative psi energy environments, if you think about it, are if you don't have the mental awareness about what you're doing, it can be as dangerous as going into a radiation environment with like nuclear radiation without your toxic nuclear suit on. You know, you're exposing yourself without the awareness. You're exposing yourself to a negative psi energy area where potentially people died in repetition over and over again, and that their experience was trauma, was anchored to that location. So, you know, we have to get a little bit smarter about how we're thinking about these things. Sorry, I'm trying to read here a little bit. I'll take a quick break to look at the comments. Sorry about this, folks. I have to keep going when I'm talking about these things. All right. Yeah. So, Brittany, I don't have an answer to that question, but I mean, I can tell you that, like, so she says, if an empath lives on an ocean, could one feel the depression the oceanic creatures are experiencing? Well, you know, let's talk about that a little bit. Dolphins. I don't know what to tell you guys. Like, you know, I think that, you know, a lot of people that work with dolphins would argue that they do have a very intense connection to them, and they experience a lot of strong sense of their emotions back and forth, that they feel like that dolphins are very intuitive communicators and that they serve a higher function to humanity. And that I don't necessarily think that that's, you know, outside of whatever. I think that they do serve a higher function. I think the same way that humans have this unique function with brainwave relative to earth resonance, one could argue that what we are to physical matter here, that perhaps dolphins and other type of oceanic creatures that have similar types of signal emissions are helping the rotation of this water, creating the waves, creating the tidal ebbs and flows in tandem with the way humans create certain events relative to earthquakes and other events. There's this bridge between what dolphins do and humans do. Humans affect earth frequency relative to land that vibrates into resonance through our perception, and maybe what's vibrating and keeping things into this, you know, marine, water filled play land of, you know, shells and floating matter and squids and octopus and, you know, sharks and everything. Sorry guys, not that they're all bad. Those are like all the ones that are like scary, right? Sorry. Lots of nice fish in there too, groupers and everything, and puffer fish, whatever, guys. But the point is like the ocean is this kind of like untamed, kind of like big, you know, floating thing where things are kind of going around it. One could argue it's sort of chaos if you were to be cynical about it, but somebody could say the same thing about certain portions of land and matter or whatever, right? So I guess you could have, you know, groups of humans that are here a little bit managing things relative to earth resonance and frequency, and you could say like things like dolphins and whales, things like that are probably more involved with things involving, you know, this. That's all. You know, again, I might have made fun of those types of concepts at one time, but I don't now. I take it pretty seriously. I'm going to keep going on this topic, though. I'm not going to be ending right now. But I might have to play a video here in a second here in between. All right. So getting back to this, what is kind of going on relative to this timeline technology? Well, I think one could argue that it does involve the pyramidal energy. It does involve things relative to ancient locations and what is known about what they're able to do relative to the plasma field. So what do I mean by a plasma field? Well, hang on, I'm looking for my... there it is. All right. I think what's really going on with human DNA, so when you think about this whole concept here, this is really when we're talking about Earth rotation. You got to think of it as, oh man, I made that lopsided. Okay. That better? No, that's still kind of weird. It just gets worse, folks. Hang on. That's better. Okay, I can live with that. Just think of it as a little bit. How do we say it? I'm not doing this right, guys. Sorry. It's because of the angle that I'm at. All right. All right. Hang on really quick. There we go. So you got to think of it a little bit like Mandelbrot type realities that go in different dimensions and timelines. And so you have like, you know, past, future. And again, the future looks like the globe. The past looks like the globe. The physical reality that we are in, static, is that DNA coil, the Jacob's ladder. And then what you have extending up this way and down here are, you know, I guess you could argue parallel dimensions, like a mirror of what's happening here and things like that, right? But this is our human experience, and that's why you have in the middle is like the vesica Pisces. The DNA coil looks like the vesica Pisces in a way. It kind of has that wrapping thing or whatever going around because we're all doing this together. The DNA, all of us together are forming through this plasma field. This is all plasma. This is universal. And it's just going back and forth like a Mandelbrot. And if you haven't, you know, if you don't know what I'm talking about, just look up Mandelbrot and just watch that pattern going in, out. One pattern merges into another that creates a mirror of it, and it keeps rotating and going on and on and on in repetition. History repeats the same way. The Bible, whatever you want to call it, it all repeats over and over again. It's going off in this direction. It's going off in that direction. You've got past, future. You've got one moving here. You can rotate this all like this, and it's going to be doing the same thing in those different directions. This might become the past. That might become the future. Get it? Does this make a little bit more sense? Dimensions, how we perceive things within a plasma field. Energy enters into the 3D prism that's formed through your pineal gland. What is your pineal gland? That's why within the pineal gland where this is all being formed, is piezo electric. So within your brain, you have this piezoelectric responsive crystalline structure. You know, and just like this is a crystal, right? Not too much light is going to reflect off this right now, I imagine, but trying to see if I can get a little bit of luminescence. There you can kind of see a little bit of it, right? So that same little bit of like, you know, multicolored luminescence that you see when you shine the right light on it. Let's see. This one, not so much right now. Hard to get on these types of cameras too, guys. Not so much. All right. These ones don't have a lot of color response to them to begin with. But the reason why I think that we have to have a larger like working group discussion on these concepts that's not foo-foo and Gaia Mother Earth, and that it has to be taken seriously, almost like, really, guys, you have to start thinking that this is like something happened, right? And those of us who kind of know what happened, like, what do we do about it? Because something's got to kind of get done. I mean, you know, we can kind of you can trust into the universe to a certain degree, but you know, things have to operate on this physical plane through us. So what do we do? What is it? What is our role here? That's why I wanted to talk a little bit more about, you know, what are some of the films this happens in and things like that, because it's just it's bizarre, guys. Like God, I don't want to make too dumb of examples here, because it's if you give too specific of ones to people, then it's very hard for them to grasp individually. So the best thing I can tell you is, if you get like a lot of this, like it just seems to happen to you like over and over again, almost, and there's sometimes where synchronicities just happen, and that's part of the golden mean, the golden ratio, and the Fibonacci sequence, especially when it comes to patterns in music and film. And it can be really challenging to know, like, when is that just in a synchronicity due to DNA cycles like this, and now that operates very similar to rotations of a spiral. So that concept of the 33 and a third, that gets into like rotations of a record in a song, right? So remember, we talked about these pyramidal structures have these 33-degree alignments. Well, why would they make revolutions per minute of a record 33 and a third? Because they're tapping into this concept. They're tapping into this energy. They don't want you to know that, but that's really what that's truly about. It's basically using the ancient energy grid to sort of manifest something new and replace it with, you know, whatever the music industry is trying to do. The same reason why the celluloid reel would go around in reels like that. All of these things were always just seem to be on magnetic loops involving magnetic tape or involving some form of spiraled rotation that taps into all of these concepts that go back to this. So it's in a way, I guess you could say some of it involved a little bit of a hack into what makes everything vibrate into physical reality. It's a little bit like you're taking the power away from what, you know, we had here as look, if you want to believe in a creator, then, and that's up to you, okay, one way or the other. But yeah, I mean, to me, it seems to me like none of this could have happened unless somebody from the outside made it a reality. I really don't know how any of it's possible without somebody above, or some people, or whatever, entities or entity, or it's just the creation energy in and of itself is God. I don't know. Whatever the plasma field might be, God itself. And it's just autonomous in nature through us. Again, I'm still trying to learn all that. I don't know yet. But I don't think that it's incompatible with what the lessons were learned in the Bible. And getting to that, I was going to find here. Well, I don't want to excessively play anybody's material at the moment because I've been getting copyright struck when I do that. So I don't want to risk that right now. My channel just recovered from one of the strikes already. So the main one isn't in danger of getting shut down immediately, but I still have to like watch it for like another, I don't know, month or so because I got 2 strikes in a row on it that shut down my channel for a couple weeks. And that really damages things badly when that happens. All right. All right, so I think it's important to play this next part, and I'm going to expand on it after it's done. It's about telepathy and ultra high frequency. So I don't want to get too dark on it or anything like that, except to say that, yeah, guys, I mean, look, some people experience technology based things when it comes to frequency, and that should be acknowledged because that's kind of a violation of a person's, like, you know, their sovereignty in a way. Having independent thought is really a core function of humanity. And when you strip that ability from a person and you try to like do things artificially, you know, things that you hear about are like V2K. People report on that all the time. I want to distinguish the difference between what is telepathy versus what might be something like V2K. V2K would be something where, those unfamiliar, that means voice to skull. That's a technology hack that can send, and my understanding is they have a way of, they know basically how audio can tune into the collagen layers within like your earlobes, your nose, you're leading into your lips, leading into your eyes. There's ways that parts of your face are more susceptible just to sending a frequency that can literally, when it's translated by the brain, just by penetrating those skin layers, can translate it to an audio layer. And like can do things like put people into song loops all day long where they hear the chorus to a really crappy song that they hate or something like that over and over again, or hear destructive messaging or even positive messaging for that matter, if the person has that in mind. I mean, that's one form of technology, but that is not intuitive communication. It operates on a completely different level. If you want to know what intuitive communication is, that's way more consistent with the clip that I suggested last night, and I'll suggest it again today. It's Dan Sherman. He was a part of something called Project Preserve Destiny, and he's retired Air Force, and he was a part of a lot of these experiments that involved intuitive communication, bending frequencies with your mind, being tested on this by the military, and he really does have a strong understanding of the intuitive communication aspect, because it's a much different thing than you find from others. And he communicates in a way that's far more easy to understand and sane than the average person that discusses the other. Usually when it's happening the other way, it's because a person seems to be a victim of some type of esoteric technology. And so I don't want to put this into the same category as intuitive communication, because it does not operate on the same principles. And so what is that? Well, I've heard people talk about those things being consistent with ham radio, that there's ham radio frequencies that operate between around 400 to 500 megahertz in that window. It's a very broad window that I just gave you guys there, but it's like, I believe it was in the 430 to 440, if I was going to get really specific, somewhere within that window. They're able to do something with modulating frequencies that can actually transmit audio from, you know, some technological source to human brainwave to where it's interpretable as an audio layer. So I do think that those things are possible and everything, but I just want to distinguish the difference between what this is involving things that are more consistent with source code and LookingGlass, whole different dynamic. And it's not, this would be less of a weapon, and this would be more designed as a defense mechanism to protect. Maybe you could use it, and I'm not being naive here. I'm telling you that the core function of this would be to prevent bad things from happening, unless, if you're smart at least, and less about doing things in a weaponized fashion, although I have no doubt that this type of thing is used for that. But I think you would find that things that are on the other level is more consistent with, like, malicious intention and weaponization, whereas this would be more timeline correction, timeline. They would be very conscientious about who they did this with. Okay. They would not abuse this technology. They would not do this with somebody that they didn't think could process it properly because of the devastation that could create. Those who understand what this is really about, what you can do with LookingGlass technology, what you can actually do with something similar to what is communicated in the film source code. No, it's not time travel. It's just like the character says, it's time, quote, reassignment. It's the ability to drop into a window of time historically for a select amount. Within the film, it's an 8-second window that they operate in, where they're literally able to drop in, experience through another person's DNA, because it's tapping into this concept here involving past, future, similar DNA traits of another person relative to universal plasma. There seems to be something that they're able to do involving timeline, because they understand that DNA has an interaction with the way all of our DNA involving this process in the brain, what's emitted through electromagnetic signals, brainwave to brainwave, pineal gland to pineal gland, how when these pineal glands, the signals go, it splashes out, it forms within the plasma field, like effectively what we exist in. All of these plasma fields are constantly interacting with one another and structuring a reality. So I just wanted to talk about that in more detail so that you guys kind of have a clearer understanding of that. All right. So before I get into this next part here, before I play the actual article, so let me get into that really quick.
All right, welcome back. This is part 2. So continuing off of what we learned from the last part, and you'll want to have this report open, and I would recommend you sift through pages 25, 26, and 27, because that's what we're going to be covering in the DIA Control Defensive Behavior Report. So now what I'm trying to do here with this second part is to sort of bridge the gap on where this whole Montauk narrative bridges into the research that was done during this time. And so before I do that, it's important to discuss the Phoenix Project and Project Rainbow. So in the early 1950s, the Phoenix Project was merged with the remnants of Project Rainbow. The Phoenix Project was to delve further into the study of electromagnetic effects and their use in achieving stealth technology. The problem the Phoenix Project faced was how to keep this new technology from having such an adverse effect on humans involved in the experiments. The director of this new phase of the project was Dr. John von Neumann, brought back to oversee operations. He concentrated on the metaphysical side of the experiments in an attempt to determine what had gone wrong. He and his team worked for about 10 years on the problem, studying why humans had such a problem with intense electromagnetic fields, especially ones that were capable of producing the sort of effects seen in the Philadelphia experiment. What they found was that the human beings are born with a time reference point. This time reference point is linked to the electromagnetic fields native to the Earth and help orient man to the nature of the universe and how it operates. And so those who are familiar, this would be probably one set different type of frequencies in relation to what I think that most people refer to as a Schumann resonance at 7.83 hertz. That's my own interpretation, and I believe that is discussed a little bit by Preston Nichols in some of his material, but I would have to get a refresher on that. But I'm fairly certain that this is tied into the Schumann resonance, what he's discussing here, for those who study that. And so to get back to this, it is a separate entity distinct from the physical body. When the generators were started on the Eldridge, the link to this point was severed, causing the crew of the Eldridge massive physical and mental trauma. So as a result of this electromagnetic, burst that severed the connection to the Schumann resonance, this is sort of what caused the trauma. And actually, the more I think about it, yes, that was part of it. It was actually related specifically to the Schumann resonance. So it was determined that the devices used in the original Philadelphia experiment had created an artificial reality around the Eldridge. Thus, the ship had removed from the normal plane of existence, rendering it invisible. The problem was that the new reality had no connection to our world, thus disorienting anyone within the field. In order to overcome this problem, a time reference point linking any potential inhabitant of the electromagnetic bottles created by the Project Rainbow technology back to their point of origin had to be developed. This problem was solved by giving the bottle a phony background, a false Earth to link to that would reduce any form of transdimensional disorder. A computer was used to recreate the time reference points of specific people and to generate a false electromagnetic background that would give the physical body something to lock onto. If this system failed, the physical and the mental body would separate, resulting in insanity. Now, I know that sounds very science fiction, and this story, I think, has always been kind of held on the fringes just because it just seems so unbelievable. But what I hope to demonstrate here by the time we're done with this presentation, which is going to be a little bit longer than the other couple that have been preceded it, is that you're going to see why this is relevant to now. This does connect to today. Okay, so, but just to finish this up, this phase of the project was completed in 1967. A report was then sent to Congress stating the human mind could be altered by the use of electromagnetics. Very important to remember, okay? With development, one could create devices that would change the way people think. Congress, fearing the results of such experimentation could lead into mass mind control, refused any further funding for the project, and in 1969 ordered that the Phoenix project be disbanded. So these are just some devices that are kind of showing you like an evolution. So this is from Preston Nichols' book right here. And if you can actually freeze on this and zoom in, and I can actually provide a link to this someplace, and you can actually better yet, just the Montauk Project is probably the book that you can find this actual document in and see this up close. So there's that. This is something I took from a YouTube clip, a screenshot I got from an actual manufacturer in modern day times. This is somebody that you can purchase this equipment from that's specifically related to the same purpose generally. And again, the whole notion of this is involving sort of weather balloon communications. Okay. And this falls within the frequency range that I've measured. So, all right, so now that we've talked about that, I need to do a little bit of background before we dig into the actual report. So in order to have this discussion regarding telepathy and ultra high frequency, we have to actually define ultra high frequency. So I don't want to get into too many like numbers and everything, but just so you have this as your notes, 300 megahertz to 3000 megahertz, or what is equivalent to 3 gigahertz, is what's considered ultra high frequency, UHF. Now, the key parts to remember is that this is involved for most, like in the United States especially, this is television broadcasting. So your television, when it tunes into a channel, it's in the UHF band. Cell phones, my own, the industry that I come from, all is operating in the UHF band. And 90% of the equipment that I use to operate in that UHF band and that I have experience with is within UHF. And that also includes satellite communications, which I guess is in that 1500, 16 to 1700 range. I think somewhere in that range as far as that, or 1.5, 1.6, 1.7 gigahertz. There's different slices within that range, okay, that covers that. Then you have personal radio services, personal radio services, including Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. You're talking about 2.4 and 2.5 gigahertz, which would equal to 2400, 2500 megahertz. And you got your walkie-talkies, cordless phones, tons of things in this band, basically. Okay, so you know what this translates to is nearly everything you touch every day that has a wireless signal is UHF. It's an important thing to remember as we're discussing this overall theme, because remember what they were dealing with here. They were talking about space-time manipulation, creating manipulations of time, creating perception. Manipulation and ultimately mind control. And they were trying to study how these things were not only useful for weather modification, but also for mind control. Okay. So now we need to also discuss cybernetics and hive mind, because these things tie together. Because ultimately, when you're talking about a mass population mind control system, you would want to exploit what's called cybernetics, or a hive mind, or the collective consciousness, or the collective intelligence. So the way to look at this too is that, within that collective consciousness, really it's sort of like a network with nodes, and it's exactly the same way that other computer network nodes are. In fact, most technologies, the more you drill these issues down and you start discussing the more esoteric and hidden things regarding human consciousness, you really break it down to realize that technology isn't an evolution so much as it's a de-evolution. All it can do is mirror the way humans already interact with one another on an energetic level. We have spheres of influence, okay? That's what the collective consciousness and collective intelligence is, but there is a network map involved, meaning there are nodes that pass along messages to other nodes and pass along messages to other nodes, and it works like a tributary system in rivers and lakes and oceans, okay? That's cybernetics and hive mind. And so in order to master this realm, you would have to have all the critical data points to understand how energetics work, how people's energetic influences affect one another. And that would involve very specific DNA, RNA data, and also having a master of the domain over radio frequency. Every single part of our human body interacts with frequency from the top down. You can find ELF, UHF, they all play a part, whether it be telepathic communications, whether it be behavior modifications, whether it be light frequency and how you perceive light. All of these things fall within the spectrum, okay? So electroencephalography, EEG, sorry, I butchered that, and then there's magnetoencephalography, MEG. So these are two terms that I just want you to sort of maybe take a pause, read through this. Just a quick little snapshot of this. EEG is electromagnetic, whereas, as electrophysiology, and then magneto is more mapping magnetic fields and with magnetometers. Sorry, that's a mouthful. They use these things called squids. This is getting into a really technical conversation that really isn't appropriate here, but these are terms that you're going to want to become familiar with, because when we're talking about measurements, how do you make a measurement of one's brain activity or how one has a PK or psychokinetic potential? What are the mechanisms in place to measure it? What are the numbers? This is how they achieve the measurement of these numbers. Okay, so not everybody has access to this equipment. That's important to remember. So let's just get into the material. So now that we have some background, okay? So telepathy and ultra high frequency, according to this report, starting on page 25, if you want to follow along.
Right, guys,
it says that they were...
So some of that was like, yeah, no shit. Sorry, I was kind of like new to doing presentation material, and I was kind of like doing things off the cuff or whatever. So I didn't mean to be so obvious about some of the material or whatever. But yeah, I did this like, I don't know, a while back. This is some of the, like one of the first documentaries that I produce, and it's kind of low quality compared to some of the other things that I've done. And, but yeah, I kind of gone into this topic many times before, so I don't necessarily need to get too deep into it beyond what I just showed you, just to give you a broader bridge into what I discussed with Preston Nichols' work into cybernetics and hive mind, and then talking a little bit about telepathy and ultra high frequency. Although I don't necessarily have to play you this documentary to get deeper into it. I just wanted to kind of let you see that for that part of what rather as I bridge it into from Preston Nichols' material into things like telepathy and ultra high frequency. Something keeps getting into me, guys. I don't know what the hell's going on. Ultra high frequency, which is a big part of what I think is the tenets of like MK Ultra, things of that nature. Okay. All right. Now, the reason why I wanted to get step away from this material is because I want to talk a little bit more about Preston Nichols and his research at Space-Time Laboratories, because I thought this guy was really compelling, because he really challenges the paradigm of how we perceive reality and how this plasma field is bent. And it was really easy to dismiss this guy as kind of a quack if you were to be cynical about it. But I really don't know. Preston Nichols is deceased now, so I don't know what was going on with him overall, but I know his books, to me, are pretty much vital reading to understand it. Why they exist and what larger purpose they might exist for, I'm not entirely sure. But one I was going to show you really quick here, because somebody shared his book with me about a year ago, and I was just amazed at how much his material was bridging into things that I've been researching and talking about. And I had no idea that he discussed in such detail some of the core concepts very similarly to how I understand them. So this is effectively Peter Moon describing Preston Nichols in the intro to the book. It's like a pre whatever, like a documentary, or what do you call those? Where, shoot, you can tell I haven't an introduction. It's an intro. Anyways, it's basically just Peter Mundo talking about how him and Peter Nichols got to know each other, and how even though they write these books together, that he was challenged sometimes by the way that Preston perceived events relative to the rest of the world. He seemed to have a slightly alternative timeline that he exists in that other people didn't. And I had to ask myself, like, how is that even possible? But I think it is. I think if you spent as much time as Preston did at his location dealing with radio frequency like he did, exposing himself to different high power magnetic fields, high power electromagnetic fields. He was using these delta T antennas that formed like, well, it's a lot like this, guys. They're antennas. I could get you a documentary if I had more available. Like if I actually could just key it up right now, I would show it to you. But he has these antennas that they're like that. They kind of form like, that's not really it, guys. That almost looks like it's a Pac-Man opening up. It's more of a, like, let me think of it. It's like he took a square like antenna like this, but it rotates on its side like this, and so it all links in. I don't know. I'm really getting this all wrong, guys, but effectively that's the core concept. There's like a square plane in here. Maybe if I did this. Yeah, but think of it, it's like this with the square in the center of the antenna, but the effect it has, it's almost like two pyramids. One goes up, one goes down, and it forms a great big square that's in rotation. And he hooked up all of these different signals to these delta T. So again, I'm again not accurate representation, but it was called a delta T. So he hooked up these delta T antennas to these high power transmitters, and he was just doing just to see what would happen. Ham radio frequencies, some of those radio son frequencies in the 1,680 megahertz range. I think he was pumping through those antennas, just trying out various things. And he claimed to be able to do things that could bend physical reality, that he could put people in these chairs where he surrounded them with bright light. Well, maybe no, wait, that's my own variation on it. Sorry, guys. I do a thing with light that's different than Preston Nichols. I have a way of doing something similar, but I use bright light. I think his is actually less light. I'm not sure that he does the bright light thing or not, but he actually does a thing where it involves like surrounding a person with speakers and then amplifying the audio exponentially, and the power of the audio resonating through the body while in this relaxed state within this chair puts a person into I guess you could say, a partially hypnotic state where they're able to do this sort of like something more consistent with like source code LookingGlass, some combination or variation on it, where they're not necessarily traveling in time, but they're able to, like, it opens up a window of perception that they can kind of drop into and look at an event, or astral travel, as it were, depending on what you perceive that to be, right? What is astral travel? I don't know. I mean, but a lot of that can occur through these same types of sound and light experiments that Preston Nichols was doing with what he called his Montauk chair. And there's been replications of the Montauk chair if you read the book and go into some of his other things like Music of Time, which I'm going to show you here more of. Yeah, he goes into these some really strange things, guys. So, for example, like, he has this whole understanding of history where, like, in his variation, this alternative timeline, I know this is going to sound bizarre, guys, but this is so it makes me think about it. Within the book here, I can show you. Hang on. He's got all these stories about the actor Mark Hamill. And it's strange because, like, I don't know where Mark Hamill, he played Luke Skywalker in the Star Wars series, but you know, according to him, Mark and his brother Chuck, again in this alternate timeline, were both guys that, like, you know, wrote music for a lot of popular artists, and that Preston was a guy that helped form a lot of these popular recording things, techniques involving microphones. And you know, if you study his research, it's hard to argue that if he didn't actually invent some of these things like he claimed, he sure as hell knows a lot about them. He really knows more than like a person that might have invented them. And so you kind of learn over time that a lot of times people use, they're not the exclusive whatever you want to say, like, you know, brain behind it. A lot of times things are reassigned to somebody else as the inventor, and this was true even about Albert Einstein, that he wasn't really the inventor of as many things as they claim. I don't know if that's true. Some people say that's true about Edison, that he was sort of just a catch-all for like a whole bunch of other people's inventions, even though he did do things himself. I don't know if that's true or not, guys. There's it's when I read things like Preston Nichols having this sort of like idea about that, I could easily dismiss it as like, well, that's just the guy that watched Star Wars too many times and has this perception of reality. Or maybe that's just a way for him as a guy that has a larger agenda to go, boo, because it gets your attention. It's something that's a little bit silly and ridiculous that makes you kind of go like, why does he have all these stories about the actor Mark Hamill? Why is his book filled with stories about the actor Mark Hamill? And it doesn't make any sense to me. It feels almost a little bit like the same thing I talk about with the Hollywood scripts. Like it's such an anomalous thing that stands out that makes a lot of his material look silly, because in order for me to accept all of his legitimate data, I also almost have to accept that this alternate timeline that he says happened. And that's really hard, because my guess is if you ask the actor Mark Hamill, he would say, I don't know who that guy is, and I've never heard of that music. Or maybe he's heard the music, but he's like, if I actually did all that, I'd be filthy rich. Because if you go and read the book, like, he'll claim that the actor wrote some songs for like the Doors and things like that. I mean, things that he would probably be raking in royalties on right now if he had actually done. So if he did do those things, cool, man. Mark Hamill, you're 10 times cooler than I thought you were, man. Not that I ever thought you were uncool or anything, but you know, you were Luke Skywalker. What kid didn't idolize Luke and to some degree when you were my age growing up in the 70s and 80s? Okay. I mean, Luke was the man, right? He saves the world. He uses the Force. Use the Force, Luke. Maybe that's the whole point of what we're talking about here. What is the Force, right? Within Star Wars, even? What are they even talking about within that movie? Not to go like way, way off the beaten path here, guys. I know this is getting weird, but hey, the universe is weird, and you know, what are we going to do, right? We got to talk about these things at face value. So when you get past the weirdness of that book that I just showed you guys, let me tell you what else is in here. If you get past all that, the boo, Mark Hamill, right? Just the same way that Phoenix Project has boo, weird. Because if there wasn't something weird in it, if there wasn't something theatrical in it, I don't think it would even inspire that level of controversy to get people drawn towards the material in many cases. Without the controversy, would you even bother to look at the Phoenix Project? Would you even look into the deeper data behind Preston Nichols if he wasn't such a character? If the people behind it didn't give the lectures in their sort of uniquely interesting ways with all the story and lore behind it? Maybe those stories and lore that are behind it are designed to communicate something that they understood about timelines, and a whole hell of a lot less to do about the actor Mark Hamill. You never know. And I've been getting clues left and right about what they understood about timelines. And let me explain something to you guys. None of it's negative. So I want you all to understand something about why I'm going into this sort of deep discussion about these antennas and brain waves and technologies and everything else like that. I'm telling you guys all these things not to scare you, not to talk about these things in any menacing way. I'm doing it because I would like to encourage you and inspire you to manifest something better, to understand how all this works, so that you can understand that, yeah, we're getting some information from different timelines. Because if they came at us in a normal way, something that frustrates the hell out of me personally, if they came at us in a normal way, we would ignore them. We would disregard this data, this evidence that's placed in front of us. So sometimes they did things like use Hollywood films, Hollywood scripts to get our attention, to where it would be done in such a way where when you were presented with it, when you were given evidence, it's a little bit like a test on your psyche. It's a little bit test on your character, on your intentions, I think, in some cases. What's going on? Like, once you have the evidence in front of you, what do you want to do now? And that's been my challenge. I don't know. I don't have a quick answer. I really don't know what to do. I do and I don't. Let me put it this way. I know that based on what's been going on, that energy balancing needs to occur, quite frequently. And what that means to say is that it's a lot harder for people to receive information brainwave to brainwave in areas that are filled with negative psi energy. And what I was learning to do this year, especially, was adapt my brainwave in locations where I impacted the Earth grid most readily. I would place myself in locations where the Earth met the ocean, very close to the coastlines, and I would do focused meditation exercises where I literally concentrated and focused on a better reality. I try to take negative events and balance them against, okay, it's a little bit like you're hearing somebody's frustrations and their cries. You're learning about their experience. And so I don't want these cries and these experiences to be relived and be re-anchored. What I would like to do is translate them into a better future, into a better experience that we can share and manifest as a collective consciousness. It's hard to do that for a larger group of people when you struggle to do it individually. One of my favorite songs is by the artist Michael Franti, when he was with the Disposable Heroes of Hypocrisy, and it's called Water Pistol Man. Water Pistol Man, full of ammunition, squirting out fires on a worldwide mission. Did you ever stop to think to squirt the flowers in your own backyard? And when you're dealing with these concepts like brainwave, what's the answer? You see, this is a whole new paradigm of what do I focus and concentrate on relative to before. It's a whole new learning process. That's like learning a new language, and you struggle sometimes. And when somebody's struggling with learning a new language, which is what this is about, I would say treat it like you do other struggles. Like if I learned that somebody was trying really hard to learn English and everything like that, but it wasn't their native language, I would do everything that I could to help bridge that person into a greater understanding of learning it, because I could see they're making the effort to reach out to me to say, hey, I'm trying to learn the same language as you speak because I want to talk to you in a more meaningful way and learn things in a more meaningful way. So I'm going to learn your language. And I would say, wow, that's really cool that you're trying to do that. So rather than chastise you when you say a word wrong or something like that, I'm just going to help bridge that gap for you. You're trying to learn and I'll try to teach you. And I won't make fun of it or anything else like that. Deal? Oh, well, I like it when you do a little bit, that kind of thing. Then you go back and forth. Maybe you add a little humor. You can poke at each other a little bit. That might make the learning process easier. Sometimes that works for some. Sometimes people get really hurt when you're like, why are you imitating me? So not everybody responds to that type of joking back and forth when it comes to that. But I would say when it comes to these types of concepts, yeah, we need to inject humor into it. And so that's why I feel like it's such a gift
when I run across things like the Cannonball Run series, when I find things like Smokey and the Bandit, when I find these really ridiculous movies that were just like these race movies that, you know, just a high speed race across the country in a Trans Am, you know, Sally Field and Burt Reynolds in a Trans Am, and there's Jerry Reed, beast bound and down, you know, 18 wheels and running. We're gonna do the things they say can't be done. Just old school Americana, done late 70s, early 80s style. This is when I was growing up, and this is when my ideas were being formed. These are the films that were the movie of the week on television, because I couldn't see most of these things in movie theaters. It was a more special experience to see a movie in a movie theater then, and we didn't have videotapes really like as commercially available or whatever when I was a little kid, you know, not until, well, yeah, actually they were starting to become in video stores. It's just that we were cheap. We didn't get one until I was like 10 years old. So all my friends were having like cable television when they were in the suburbs, and we lived out in the country a little bit more, so we didn't have it. We had to go to other people's houses to watch their MTV and their HBO. And now I'm aware that I think not all these people were evil. Sorry, this is hard. Things just happen, guys, and but a lot of people left information here that when I review it, I know that they weren't poisoned always. That something happened to them. And so some of the best information I got are from the most tragic people that I've learned about. That's hard for me. It's like they knew on some level that something was going to happen to them, and they created it as like a fail-safe. Just in case something happens, you know, here's your message. We're just going to try to make you laugh as much as we can so that you know that it's going to be okay. And you don't have to worry. See, I'm happy right now for what they did, but I'm disappointed in myself for how I interpreted it. So that's all. And, you know, I'm processing that at the moment. Hang on. I let people tell me that they were all evil and dark, and always were, you know, and I allowed it in. I never thought that like Burt Reynolds was like dark and deranged or anything, guys. That's not what I'm saying here. Quite the opposite. I just think he was a party guy, right? I think that's what a lot of these people in Hollywood, they're in those movies like Cannonball Run, and they were just party people. They weren't deranged and dark for the most part. They were just old school. They had old school ways of doing things. I relate to it because I don't really want to change. I don't want to adapt to some new bizarre paradigm of the way that, you know, people are asking us to in our culture. It's not really for me. It doesn't feel right. None of these terms and words they're asking me to use feel right. And I'm very understanding. But I'm old school, and I should be allowed to be that way. And others should too, without people telling us that something's wrong with us. That's just, you know, I'm sorry, guys. I can't use your pronouns. I can't even keep track. Not out of disrespect and everything like that. It's just that I don't even understand it. My brain can't process that because it doesn't feel organic. It doesn't feel like it has anything to do with reality. It feels like it has everything to do with programming us into something that's destructuring this exact energy concept here. This is all structured through Ka-Ba elements, male, female elements. Now, I've told people over and over again, that's not some like rigid interpretation that says that you must accept this. No, Ka and Ba, it just means you need to accept that men and women just need each other. They have to balance each other's energies, and that can be expressed in all sorts of ways. but it's damaging. It's damaging to your individual psyche, I think, to go excessively without expressing male to female energies. And again, that can be in a lot of different ways. And so, like, here's the thing, guys. I don't know what the hell was going on, like, back in 1980 when my parents took me to go see two films in the theater, Stir Crazy and Used Cars. Stir Crazy stars Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder. Genes, you know, there's all kinds of things going on. The selection of the actors are relevant to these things. Sidney Poitier directed this film. It's a pretty good comedy. I'm not sure why it hasn't made it to the echelons of classic comedy, because it is pretty classic. It may just be because it has a lot of political, correctness issues, like a lot of these films I've noticed do. Nearly all the great timeline movies would be canceled today. So these people, they just were kind of existing in a different time, where now everybody wants to examine every last detail of a script and say it's this or that, under these false pretenses, instead of just accepting these people as who they were. A lot of them were just really nice natured people. They're different. They wouldn't know what to do and what's going on now either. They'd probably look at what's happening now from another timeline and go like, I don't even want to stick around for that. To hell with that. Maybe they wanted to drop something inside these films to say like, yeah, maybe if there's this person that's listening on the other end and they actually are going to say these things about me like I am now, maybe it's worth it. See, what if I never said this about any of those people, and so they never felt like it was worth their time? What if I never complimented them in a way that I think is real? It is actually. Like, when I say good things about these people, I mean it. And I'm not being duped. I don't have Stockholm syndrome. Some of them are just good, decent people that was their chosen profession. People loved them. They got used in some cases and didn't even know what they were a part of, for good and bad reasons. Can't we all relate to that? And so I kind of watched these movies and I kept on finding all these synchronizations that were giving me information, sometimes saying my name straight out, making reference to what my email is, making reference to all these things. And at first, guys, I mean, again, I wasn't delusional about it. I was like going, nah, these are just coincidences. It's the Fibonacci spiral. It's the golden mean. It's not really happening like I think it is. But by the time you start seeing them name characters Gabriel over and over again, and you realize it wasn't just a reference to like, the messenger as Gabriel or the archangel system as Gabriel, like there actually seems to be saying something to me. They'll put my birthday, they'll put parts of my social security number and quick freeze frames on the screen to where I'm going, all right, was that in everybody else's copy of this movie, or is that just something that was for me? Because I don't get what's going on here. And at some point, I just had to accept that I seem to be this person that, because of whatever my secret connections are to Hollywood, in tandem with what I wasn't told about, and then getting to be more of a fan of these things instead of like immersed in the culture of it, but yet being part of a group of people that seems to have behind the scenes without telling everyone, were involved with a lot of Hollywood production and a lot of making films, both with CGI avatar technology, meaning to say they would change their face on camera, either using early forms of CGI, which would involve optic technology, bending lenses, and then prosthetics. And then the modern forms of it that we're getting into the 70s and 80s, where they're able to actually digitally change the image in real time or whatever. And that's just become more sophisticated in its commercial forms. Right down to now, you have people on their home computers that are able to turn Jim Carrey into the star of The Shining. Right? Where you can literally take the star of one movie and turn it into another person entirely. You can completely delete another person's existence and place another person's face mask on theirs. It's trippy. It's one of the reasons why guys, I make constant, I'm told to.
I'll do my presentations in a way that doesn't allow anybody else to lay credit to themselves, and not because I have any ego about it. It's because it was very important for involving these timeline things for them to get their message to the right people at the right time. And timelines can be manipulated, right, to where people in the future or the past can be given the wrong information, just like we can in this current timeline. Someone can lie right to our faces, right, in real time, so they can do it from another timeline. And you have to be conscious and aware of that too. But, you know, I don't like to focus on that, guys. I really don't. So I'm going to wrap this up here pretty soon. And what I would like us to do is just to focus on, you know, I'm not sure I want to wrap this up yet, actually. I'm not done talking. I don't feel right wrapping it up. I know I need to sometime, but I'm still fleshing this idea out, guys. So if you want to leave, that's okay, but I'm going to stay on for a little while longer. Ow. Sorry, I cramped up. But the concepts, the concept I'm talking about here relative to the Hollywood actors, I think that once you grasp, like what I'm telling you here, Hollywood was most certainly involved with this technology. That's why films like Source Code exist. That's why you find multiple references to the term looking glass, both in alt media. It's being popularized with intention, both to steer people off the right path to knowing what it really is and what it can do. And they want it to be a little bit ridiculous. They don't really want people to understand the core concepts. And for good and bad reasons, guys. I can understand from a defense perspective why you wouldn't want this to be known either. But, you know, again, the cat's out of the bag. It's known. So getting back to what I was talking about. Why did these people that I knew take me to go see the films Stir Crazy and Used Cars back in 1980? Here's the thing, folks. I did a whole series of reports, okay, in Fontana, California. When I did those reports, I was talking about the Zodiac. Now, that material on the Zodiac was very draining. It did a lot energetically to me that was, honestly, it was one of the worst experiences I've had doing my live material, or not my live material, but my field material when by reporting. Those unfamiliar with it, it started off with a report at in Rancho Cucamonga, Fontana area. I was kind of parked out front of a neighborhood called the Hawthorns. And then I proceeded to go up and down Fontana Avenue, Baseline, all these different roads and things like that. And I explained the Kaiser Steel connection to Hollywood and things involving things that are like dark and more involving ritual sacrifice. It wasn't a good day for me, even though getting the information out, I would say, is a positive experience. And I'm glad that it got done, because I would not feel satisfied if I hadn't fleshed out that whole idea. I mean, if I hadn't told people like, hey, here's the street. You point in this direction. It goes to that street over there. It aims in this way. Do you understand yet? I'm right here by the road signs. Please do the research. You know, it shows people that I'm giving it the right attention and the right amount of importance. I'm willing to take it to that extra level. So let's talk about this. What might have gone on here? How could they be doing this from one timeline to another with these antennas and everything like that, right? When you get into this, what we're dealing with now is a loop of information where, all right, so I'm 5 years old, right? And I go to that movie theater in Fontana and I witness the movie. The film is operating at that geographic location, a lot like this pyramidal structure, the same thing that the ancients knew about when you do the whole thing with this.
when you aim something at 33 degrees. It's kind of operating on a similar concept with the notion that we as humans can be this sort of pyramidal structure individually because of what we contribute to the energy field. That sometimes what this prism is within the mind matches the geographic location because there is no space and there is no time. It's just the universal plasma field that if we did not perceive space and time, we'd just be floating around and it would all be chaos and a bunch of amoebas floating, and that would not be any fun at all. It'd be like way more like the dark parts of the film The Matrix, where you're just some battery waiting to get harvested, and I refuse to accept that as our reality. That's why I want to talk about, I want to appeal to people to not let the cynicism get the best of them when it comes to the Hollywood timeline aspect of it, but to also be realistic about what's really occurring. Yeah, in some cases, you've got some people that are involved with that are not doing very nice things. They did have dark intentions. Some of them were involved with some of these dark occult groups. And yeah, you should be suspect of the way that they communicate to you. Sometimes it'll freak you out a little bit and it's designed to spook you. But the thing that I've learned about the ones that are more benevolent in nature is they make it to where once you get it, it's a lot like the time where I was watching Blake Edwards' film Skin Deep as I was drawing my 33-degree line from Astoria column, you know, and I was finding out where 33 degrees from Astoria, Oregon's tall column on top of the hill goes to. You know, the same concept we're getting back to here, guys. What is this concept that involves the same thing involving the Astoria column? You have a pillar on top of a hill, and they aim that pillar in different directions. And then there's alignments that exist by design that are at 33 degrees, 303 degrees, and 330 degrees because they seem to operate in these triple threes, double threes, whatever. Okay. And as I was doing this one, I learned that the 33-degree line from Astoria column lined up with my birth location and crosses Blake Island at 33 degrees. And so as my lineup is crossing Blake Island, I look up at my television screen and the character says, "You guys, you won't believe it. There really is a God and he's a gag writer." And so then he gets like taken in by this huge ocean wave and knocked on his ass. And it's this really funny scene. It's done for comedy reasons. There's nothing tragic about it. It's actually like, you know, telling you that much like Robert Anton Wilson says, the gods or God will be recognized by its hilaritas, its hilarity, its good humor. That the gods, you'll know the gods are working through something because of their ability to inject humor in it. They want you to be drawn towards love. They want you to be inspired that way. The problem is that humans, I think, in the human condition has become far too accustomed to fear and trauma. It's become far too accustomed to those methods as a way to motivate energy and push energy in one direction or the other. It's a little bit like, you know, shouting as opposed to, you know, just trying to appeal to somebody's better nature, always going for the rah, 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 instead of like going, well, can I appeal to your good humor? You know, yeah. So that's why I really do. I like that Robert Anton Wilson reminds me of that, and that when I have these more mystical experiences or these things that are involving timelines that are bending physical reality, that a lot of times it's coming from people that you may not consider to be, to your point, you know, Lisa, like they're not always the most, quote, godly, right? Yet the humor of the gods seems to be operating through them. The humor of God, the humor of that, like that divine humor, I find it in something as stupid as the Cannonball Run. I hope that makes sense. I see it operating through these guys that were part of the Rat Pack. They were in Sin City. They were the Vegas Rat Pack. They were the ones that were, you know, super into, hey, the womanizing drunk, you know, always has a cigar and always has a drink in his hand. In fact, in the movie Cannonball Run, Dean Martin and what's his Sammy Davis Jr.'s character, they never not have a drink inside their hand. They're constantly passing booze back and forth. Pretty much every character drinks and drives, by the way, in Cannonball Run. Maybe that's why they're not as popular as they used to be. I don't know. These movies, these movies are like they're advertisements for drinking and driving, almost like the movie Spun, Spun was for methamphetamine abuse. I mean, really, guys, like it's bizarre how Cannonball Run functions almost like, it's Miller time. Take a 6-pack on the road and, take it to 100. I mean, that's really pretty much the theme of the whole movie, but I wouldn't call it a evil intentioned movie. It's like it's ridiculous in ways that get your attention, and then once you unpackage the information, they're just like, wow, this is almost like that Blake Edwards thing that I'm telling you. I'm crossing Blake Edwards Island as I'm drawing this 33-degree island, and as I look at Blake Island, the guy says there really is a God and he's a gag writer, and I'm thinking to myself, it's so true. Every time I get one of these hints about this alignment involving pyramids, it's never menacing or threatening to me. I never feel like, oh no, this is horrible. I just fall in love with the world all over again. That's why anytime I step away from my maps longer than a few weeks, I know something's wrong, because when I'm studying the maps, I keep finding new things. The more I look into maps, the more I discover all of these alignments, these ancient alignments. And again, the humor comes back. I start realizing that no, there's nothing dark that's going to happen. We should not try to program ourselves into a darker future, myself included, guys. Check me. I mean, I asked that, but I have to also address what's happening in physical reality so that we can bridge the gap into understanding what's happening. People will mock what I'm talking about here if I don't get past the other material, guys. Do you kind of understand that? On some level, I have to do all this material on the Antifa, on the smartphones, on the hacking, because number one, whether I like it or not, those people make it my reality when I don't want it to be, so I have to address it. And then once I do, I hope that you guys understand the value in what I do. It's not always by intention, and it's not like I plan to do this all the time, but yeah, sometimes I piss off people on all these different sides, and guess what happens? It changes the heart of a person that was before, they were completely drawn towards hate towards me. Then once they get brought into this material, initially hating me, initially feeling aggressive towards me, or feeling like I was insulting them or their values or something, number one, they realized that I wasn't actually doing that, and it wasn't necessarily my intention in most cases. And then even if that was the line that got crossed, once they get access to all this, they begin to find a lot of the things they were offended by irrelevant. That's what I've learned. What this really did for me, once I got all this information about the universal plasma field, what we all exist in, things that offended me before stopped offending me as much, because I just didn't perceive reality the same way. I don't perceive any of these things involving, especially when it comes to race baiting, that all really, really became irrelevant to me, and, and thank you for that. I appreciate it, Lisa. I mean, really, guys, like, and especially like, the conversations that I have with people here behind the scenes, and the things that I do with these chats and everything like that, without having all these dialogues and being able to express these things with a group of people that have the potential of understanding even those who don't. I feel like at least when I'm in a very small or limited group with the people that join these chats, that there's the potential for people to understand this at a deeper level, and to equally not feel like it's all dark and menacing, because I really don't want that to be it. Now, yes, have your radar up. You should not accept it all blindly. People will seek to influence you once you're tapped into this system. You've got to have your radar up to where you're not just going to be the passive conduit of other people's intention, to where you're making them all rich and they're never doing nothing for you, or you're making them all, successful, you're making them all beautiful, you're making them all whatever, right? Because that's kind of what you can do when you have this ability. It'll neglect parts of you and you'll give it to everyone else. And so I don't want to encourage people to do that, because that's damaging to you, and then you won't re-radiate as much POR as you normally would. Someone's, reminds me of this a lot, that I'm not as self-concerned or as concerned about my individual situation enough relative to the broader situation. And you know something? That's why I said the Water Pistol Man lyrics, is because this has been my challenge for a very long time. It's one of the reasons why I love the work of the filmmaker Michael Mann. He's constantly discussing this theme. It's in the film Manhunter. It's in the film Heat. It's in the film Thief. It's in the film,
it starts with a C. It has Tom Cruise and Jamie Foxx. Why am I forgetting the name of it suddenly? Anyways, Michael Mann is a brilliant director. It's in The Last of the Mohicans. All of these films delve into this topic of that balance that you strike between like what you're dedicating your life work to, what draws you in, what your passion is, and where your commitments are outside of that when you actually have something in front of you that you actually have to deal with and address. The film Heat deals with this brilliantly. It's basically cops versus robbers. You have Al Pacino as the lead cop. You have Robert De Niro as the lead thief. And you see how they're both abandoning everything in their personal lives because they're so much into this chase of cops and robbers. It is their fuel. It is what motivates them. It is what drives this whole process of past and future and present. It is like they've got this thing inside them that like they can't let go of it. They can't let go. And you see them over and over again in these films where they're faced with these really impossible decisions of, do I abandon my mission or do I abandon my my work right now and deal with this over here? You know, I mean, and you see them contemplating constantly in these movies and having discussions with each other about the intensity of it is amazing. But Manhunter in particular is about an investigator that's trying to locate, serial killers. That's his specialty. And in order for him to do it, he has to get inside the mind of the killers to a degree. And I've been watching Manhunter since I was a kid for some strange reason. I don't know why I was drawn to a movie that's about a criminal investigator trying to find serial killers. Gee, I wonder. And it resonated so strong with me. It touched me in such a way that I feel like whoever did it, that whoever is behind the larger production team of Michael Mann understands exactly what goes on in my heart and what is part of my whole process involving adrenaline and what activates me and gets me going at certain times. They get it. They also get the unique challenge that you have, that you have personal failures as a result of these things that motivate you. And the nice thing about, Manhunter is it doesn't have that tragic ending like a lot of his other films do. Sorry, I'm not trying to give spoilers here, guys, but you can watch it and figure it out yourself. But if you ever care about spoilers, don't watch my channel. But in Manhunter, his character is basically, it's about the same story as Silence of the Lambs. He's a criminal investigator named Will Graham, and he is drawn to these cases because he seems to have an ability to get in the heads of the killers, and he just learns about them psychologically. And again, it's not like he becomes psychotic himself. He doesn't feel like what they feel, but the process of learning about them and getting into their world, it's so dark and traumatizing that it puts him into an emotional space that he finds it hard to snap out of easily. It takes a lot of work to get him there, and he needs a lot of support. It doesn't happen immediately. He has to go into situations for certain amounts of time. He tells them, I did what I was supposed to. You got to let me go now so I can go concentrate on these other things. And he tries to go to the beach and spend time with his wife and his kid and raise some I think he's trying to raise some turtles. And they put like some fencing around it. There's like a metaphor for protecting the turtles and putting the fencing around it. When you get that deep into it, you don't snap out of it right away. When you're surrounded by this, as much as you want to, as much as you convince yourself that you can, you don't snap out of it right away, always. I want to, and I wish I could. And I do think that the conditions are going to be made to where I'm not going to have these burdens the same way that I did before, because somebody else has to deal with it. At some point, I've done my part.
But no, it doesn't happen immediately. But I understand his character so much. I understand it completely because there's something that happens, and I've told people this over and over again. I've even played it when I could in my live streams. I don't want to risk a copyright infringement thing, but it's where he says they're talking about this killer called the Tooth Fairy, and he's been killing lots of people on moon cycles. He literally knows this is all occult related. He's killing people according to moon cycles, creating sacrifices. And this guy knows all about it. Will Graham, the investigator, he knows all about tuning into their patterns. He knows all about how their minds work. And not many people do. So they have to recruit him to find these people in certain situations, even when he needs a break. So his partner is, he's so focused on the mission that he loses humanity sometimes. And he's just looking at this as Will is like, they're like at the last night, you know, it's leading into the moon cycle. They don't know if they're going to catch this guy. They're still contemplating it. And Will is just kind of there, like talking it through out loud. And he's like, this guy, he's obviously the product of this effed up childhood. He obviously experienced a lot of abandonment, and he's expressing this twisted fantasy of these kills, you know, through using these mirrors. I don't want to express it in detail, guys. It's gross, so I'm not going to talk about it. But he's like, you know, he's wanting to be desired and wanted over and over again because his parents, you know, were really abusive to him. He didn't experience a lot of this growing up. And then, you know, he's going into detail about what made this guy have his neuroses because he just understands them at that level. But that's also what's allowing him to like find him. It's the magnet that understanding him and having that little bit of empathy for a person that's completely deranged. It's not like you love them. It's not like you necessarily want to forgive them. It's that you have to get to that level of tuning into them to really capture them. And he's like, he's talking about it and he's feeling it. And he goes, I know what happened to this guy. It's so fucked up. Somebody took a child and they manufactured a monster. And so his partner's going, are you kidding me? This guy's like butchered families, man. Are you empathizing with this sick? You know, are you empathizing with them? And he goes, as a child, yeah. He was born an innocent child, and someone manufactured a monster. As a kid, yeah, I feel really bad for him. But as an adult, he's irredeemable. As an adult, somebody needs to kill him. He can't be here with the rest of us. Does my way of thinking bother you? Does this duality of understanding him at that level bother you? Because I can still achieve everything you need me to, understanding it that way. So to me, it's not really about, how do I say it? It's not really about maybe forgiving in that sense. It's not really about that. I think it's mostly that it's his way of saying that if I didn't understand these people the way that I go about doing it, if I didn't tune into them the way that I do, I wouldn't be able to catch this person like I'm about to do at this moment. It's that at that very critical moment where he's saying all these things and he's processing it, it's like he's in that little part of that guy's mind a little bit that feels sorry for himself. And it's like, that's where it's almost like that tunes into that part of that guy's brain, almost like it's a geolocation beacon where he's just like, if he hadn't internalized it at that level, how the hell could he have caught that guy? It's that it is like you said, a little bit of the mercy, a little bit of the empathy for that person. It's somewhere finding their humanity somewhere in the back of whatever's gone on with them, that if you don't find that, then you don't find the larger problem. You don't get down to what's happening. And then I just started to grasp all this on a much deeper level, that I have to apply this same logic to this timeline thing and what's going on with people within Hollywood and what's going on with people that are potentially within my history. That I think that they would want me to be talking about what I'm talking about, but to also communicate that this wasn't always the way that it was, that the people that dropped a lot of this information that now I'm telling you, I'm sad to report to you, aren't who they were. They aren't who they were, but they were good people at one time. Some of the people that you relied on then were amazing, and the information they gave you then was good. I just need you to understand that now. Feel some sympathy for them and feel sorry for who they are existing in front of you today, but know that they're not the same people. A lot of these people changed for much worse. They will try to convince you the otherwise, that it's the opposite. And I know they're connected to defense projects. I know they're connected to intelligence projects. I get it. There's no reason why you would, in most cases, feel compelled to listen to me versus them. I say it with a heavy heart. It's like you're existing in two different realities. And you're not conscious and aware of how the other one even came into fruition or existed, because you know it's part reality. I'm not suggesting that what happened with all these people that before, like when I talk about the Bothell things, yeah, things happened. They weren't good. But there seems to be a merging or not a crossing, but yeah, we're living in some sort of merged existence of a couple different timelines. And in one, some of these people that I've learned have become kind of almost nearly demonic, like exorcism time. There's another side of them, there's a parallel to them that exists in some higher self that is helping, that is literally telling you how horrible this other of them is. My sadness stems from just not seeing that a lot of it was good from the get-go. It didn't originate as bad. It's something that it's complicated. A lot of them came from families they wish they hadn't come from. They tried to do something better with it. Others didn't agree with them. If you want to know a little bit about this, watch The Holcraft Covenant, starring Michael King. If you need a link to that. I think it was a book, but they also made a video or a movie to it. And I'll try to get you a link to the trailer or something here. Or rather, I'll just give you the IMDb link so you can see what it's about. But sorry, guys, man. Sometimes this gets heavy for me. That's all. It's just too personal. But I gotta talk about it because, you know, I can go negative, guys, you know, but I need you to understand that I guess a lot of my disappointment in certain circles doesn't always originate with the way things were historically. It's just something else happened, and you know, it leads a little bit like this. It goes into a little bit of this type of theme. The son of a German general becomes part of a mysterious conspiracy to gain hidden Nazi funds. Directed by John Frankenheimer. Guys, John Frankenheimer is a pretty relevant director. He's been involved with a lot of these timeline films. He was involved with The Manchurian Candidate, which involves like MK Ultra, remote assassination triggers, things like that. So yeah, I would say nearly anything John Frankenheimer does is pretty relevant. French Connection, William Friedkin's films, similarly, like The Exorcist, John Borman for John Frankenheimer, and William Friedkin. 3 directors from the 70s that, like, nearly all of their things have these types of themes involving this, and that'll lead you into clues. And so when I watched this film, I was pretty blown away by it, because I was told that there's something kind of like this that's happening, and that I'm just, because I don't have access to the deeper legal aspects of it, I'm just not made aware of who's controlling what and who's on what side. But if you watch the whole Craft Covenant, I would just tell you guys that, yeah, there does seem to be a lot of battle behind the scenes involving some considerable resources that I don't have the right value system, I guess, according to some people, to gain access to it. So they would probably make arguments that I'm not competent to do so. And they would try to create cases through which they could get others to participate in creating an argument that I'm not competent. And that way they could all share and split something amongst a falsified identity if I'm able to be removed from the picture. You kind of understand how things work. And so what I'm told is, guys, just to be straight up with you, is that they put me into a lot of different scenarios and situations, just trying to understand motivations, you know. So they'll sometimes leave me hanging for a long time and let a lot of bad things happen to me. But I do believe that the number of times that's going to occur will get fewer and fewer, because it's just become, I made it more aware to guys that we have to start working together to structure a better reality. We have to start being more proactive to really do something to manifest better. And again, guys, I was thinking about stopping, but I'm not going to. So I'm not going to go here in a couple minutes either. Sorry. But soon. I'm not going to make it a marathon. I want this to be more of a creation discussion now. Now that I've talked about, you know, some of the weirdness and forgiveness. I don't forgive certain things, guys. It's not inside my DNA. But see, this is why maybe I'm reintroducing myself to Christian principles in a more meaningful way, so I understand Christ consciousness in a more meaningful way, to where I need to understand why I need to be more forgiving in certain scenarios towards certain people, based on energy and based on what energetics can do to a person's psyche. And understanding at a deeper level, like I do, I should be doing better, and I should be encouraging better in others relative to what I know. But it's challenging. And I think this is part of why, you know, perhaps why people, you know, I don't know. I mean, like, why they value church so much. I never did. To me, it always felt like something people had to do as a responsibility. But I kind of understand why some people might be into that. It's a little bit, you know, it's co-creation, right? You're getting together in a building and you're kind of looking at everybody saying, like, well, we all agree that we believe in this, whether it's the Bible and Jesus, or, you know, whatever other things that people go into a synagogue or a mosque or a church or wherever your temple is, whatever you're trying to manifest with your group, or whatever you believe in that you're reinforcing with your group. And I guess I just understand it better now. And so when it comes to the timeline films, folks, I'm not trying to pollute your mind. I'm not trying to like change things or freak anybody out. I'm really trying to learn, honestly, when it comes to the timeline films. Like, if there's somebody out there that also synchronizes weirdly with Smokey and the Bandit and Cannonball Run, like nearly every time you watch it, please tell me. I'd be curious to know. That's some very strange. But it was funny to me when I saw how the script was structured, because I'm like, this whole script is structured so non-linear, so random. It was designed to do this, just like the film Smokey and the Bandit. It's really a thin thread plot. It's so thin thread. Like, you can basically barely tell that the movie even has a plot. It is just an excuse to keep Burt Reynolds, Sally Fields, and Jerry Reed on the road for an hour and a half in a big semi truck and a Trans Am.
in a high-speed chase with the Smokey, played by Jackie Gleason. To the moon, Alice. Interesting that Jackie Gleason is the guy that said, to the moon, Alice. You guys really, I mean, guys, God has a sense of humor. You don't have to feel like this is all cynicism. Like, I used to be like, oh, sure, yeah, right. No, they are clues, guys. And the people that do these things do have a sense of humor. They really do. They have a lively sense of humor, and they're probably wired more like you than you think. And allow that to be a possibility. Yeah, some are tricksters with negative intentions. Touche. But believing in people is a powerful thing. And not believing them is equally powerful, I guess you could say. You're canceling somebody out, you know, whatever, can be a pretty powerful thing too. But I love that I saw this from the band The Flaming Lips, where Wayne Coyne said, never underestimate the power of believing in someone, because you make them what they are. And to a degree, I really believe that. I really think that what that really amounts to is when you express love, when you express admiration, respect, and care and concern, that you're transmitting plasma, and you're contributing to that person's ability to become what they are. And so, you know, when you go out of your way to destabilize it equally, I mean, you know, when you remind a person, you try to reinforce the message to that person that they don't matter to you, then yeah, you're sending that message that you would like to seek to break them down within the plasma field. Or you would seek to diminish their influence, or you would seek to make them less whatever, maybe just for your own whatever. And I understand that too. I've had people that were so harmful and so damaging to my psyche at certain times in my life that, yeah, to me, the only way to get them, you know, out of my existence was to constantly damn them to reduce their influence. But there reaches a certain point where you must know that what that can wind up doing is harming you individually. Those types of actions can harm and damage your karma exponentially. And, you know, you never want to do that to yourself. Sorry, guys, I've been a little bit sloppy with I didn't bring in enough tissue here. Sorry. Don't mean to be all whatever on camera. All right. This material, though, just gets heavy for me, because I kind of grew up just immersed in loving Hollywood and loving television and just looking forward to it as my daily entertainment. And when that all sort of changed to where new things don't really inspire me like they did, I don't like the new material that comes out. There's really not any television series that I go, yeah, that's something a person should watch. That's a movie somebody should watch. It's just so rare. It almost never happens now. I kind of wonder what's going on. I mean, even amongst people that I thought were really great before, suddenly they just suck, like at everything they do. No offense, I'm not going to say who they are, but sorry. I'm trying not to be gross here, guys. It's just like it got so runny earlier. Oh, here we go. I got something I can do this properly with. Sorry about that. See, I'm growing my beard out and I'm not used to having it. So there's all these pitfalls that go with having a longer beard. Yeah, thank you, Lisa, because I think that's what this is about, right? I think that maybe what we're supposed to do is more openly process all these things. That way we can cancel culture. Maybe if I just tell you for a couple hours and welcome in the criticism for saying, I don't know what your pronouns are, maybe that'll just inspire more of the same, to where people can get to a more rational discussion about what it's designed to do, without feeling like I'm trying to trample on somebody, because I want people to know that I do care. You know, look, guys, I'm not heartless about these things. I don't I don't want to see people like
judged or made to feel like they're not welcome because they made a certain selection. I'm from Portland, for crying out loud. I mean, you know, not from there, but you spend enough time in Portland, yeah, you're exposed to like everybody needing you to accommodate their everything. I'm vegan. I'm, you know, use the right pronouns. Well, that's new, guys. That's all new. I'm telling you, as long as I lived in Portland, I really don't remember ever a single time ever when I was doing all my hanging out, going and seeing concerts, where I was more of a socialite in the area and people actually knew who I was. And a lot of people did know who I was back in the day in Portland. I don't know why I didn't have that much of a profile or whatever. It's just that I went to a lot of these events that serve free booze and free dinner, and I joked around a lot on internet forums, and I made kind of a spectacle of myself using comedy. I just joked around about a lot of things and poked fun at, I just poked fun basically at sort of like food culture. That's all. But I liked being a part of it. I enjoy good food. I like trying different things, but I would poke fun at it at the same time. And so at first, I think people were kind of annoyed by me. They thought I was a troll, or I was kind of like a spazzy guy, or I guess they would call me. You know, but then over time, once they brought me in, they were kind of like, oh, I see what you're doing with this, you know? And it's weird how I started off as a person that was a little bit trolly, but I wound up being a person that I think once I was integrated into their group, that I would kind of point out things in a polite way that sometimes where maybe a person was being judgmental of, like a restaurant worker, for example, inside their review, and being really shitty about it and judgmental. And then I would kind of explain something, having like a sister that, you know, has done a lot of service industry work as a waitress and other types of things involving like a sous chef and prep cooks and other things like that, you know, having all that experience and hearing all the stories from her, and, you know, positive and negative. I knew the things that make her feel good as a person that's in the restaurant, you know, like, for example, when a person puts all their plates in a stack in their bowls and they put all the silverware in there and makes it easy for the person to take the dishes away. I get that it's not your job and you pay for a tip. Fine, whatever. But it's nice. It's nice to do that for somebody and to leave a tip, right? It's nice that you make them go through less effort just because, you know, you felt compelled to do it. Stack, stack, stack. It's just a nice thing you can do for a person like you're a guest at their house. I get it. You're in a restaurant, so maybe, hey, if you got other things to do, maybe don't feel like you're rude for not doing it. I'm not telling you that. But if the person was really nice to you, it's just another way of being nice back. Or maybe you can't afford to do more than the 20% tip, but you want that person to say, or 15% tip, or whatever you do. But you want to show that person that you still care, even though you can't, you know, whatever. That's just another way of doing things, you know. And so I just learned about that. Sorry, I wasn't trying to excessively get drawn into that metaphor. I forgot why I even mentioned it. That's why I was kind of stalling there for a second. Sorry. But I guess what I'm saying though is that's kind of when it comes to these Hollywood things, I don't want to excessively program these people from the past or the future or the present or whatever they perceive it on. I have to think that people are going to be able to access information from other timelines, and some of them I think are existing today. So I think we have people that are living today that were part of this cluster of actors and musicians and producers, directors, writers, that all did both entertainment and timeline technology, whatever. And that they mostly were there as a phenomenon of the late 70s into the early 80s, when a lot of this was really picking up, at least the things that I've identified. And if I were to take a cynical approach on this, and they were perceiving that same information now, so what if I were to say, for example, I learned that Burt Reynolds did in fact do all these things for good reasons, that him and Dom DeLuise were partnered on all their dialogue going back and forth because they were really dropping clues. And it was something done for benevolent reasons. Maybe they themselves had no clue about it, but they just knew that, hey, you say these lines this way, it's going to be funny for this reason, and you can believe it or not. And they're like, fine, man, it's ridiculous, but we'll do it. If you watch the movie Cannonball Run critically, you'll agree with what I'm saying more than likely. And I'm not trying to get a whole bunch of people to go out and buy a copy, guys. It's not like that. I'm just telling you, like, if you watched both of them, Cannonball Runs 1 and 2, either film individually or both, or in, you know, whatever,
you're going to see just how non-linear they are, how little sense they make directly. The jokes themselves, the punchlines often fail if you don't understand there's a much larger punchline, there's a bigger joke that's going on. Then it's incredibly funny. But the joke itself within the film, you're almost kind of like, huh? But if you're in the know and you're actually, it was designed for you, that's going to be another one of those things where God is recognized by his hilaritas, his laughter, his sense of humor, that you'll see that it's really kind of a way of God working through all of these people in this really strange way. It's like they have all the right DNA groups. They're all there in the same place at the same time. They show up on the set. All these super creative people with all their plasma outputs in the same location at the same time. It's pure magic. It really is. It's living magic. It is the reason why it's called Hollywood. They know what this magical cocktail is of location and DNA, the right blood groups, the right locations, anchoring that experience of laughter or trauma, whatever it is. In this case, I'm guessing it was tons and tons of laughter and inside jokes, because it's all these guys just drinking and laughing and getting their lines wrong and having a good time. Hoorah. Good on you. I'm glad. See, that's the way it should be. They were fixing things, and they were all, and I would argue that if they hadn't had as much fun as they did, it wouldn't have been effective. You see, that's literally like Huey Lewis. That's the power of love. They're just like, this is going to find its way to the right people at the right time. And we're going to make a fun movie that everybody else is going to watch all these cars race around. They're not going to understand the jokes, but whatever. There's enough physical things going on. They bring in Jackie Chan. He gets into some fights with people. You have Dean Martin spill a drink on someone. That's funny, right? It doesn't matter why. It doesn't matter what he said. It's just funny, right? These people are just funny because they're doing it for whatever reason they're doing it for. The physical comedy aspect is enough to keep you there. Once you get past that, though, what are you really watching? I'm telling you this because I didn't just get sent to the theater with my parents to see that film Stir Crazy in Used Cars that also had interesting production behind it. Used Cars was a Robert Zemeckis film. It was produced in part by Steven Spielberg. Early Steven Spielberg. This is around the same time as Jaws, remember. He wasn't as popular. Rather, he wasn't like a world-renowned director quite yet, but he was on his way, right? When this silly comedy with Kurt Russell's made about used car salesmen, all kind of a TNA, movie with dirty jokes in it for adults. Same for Stir Crazy. Same pretty much for the Cannonball Run series, but they're a little bit more PG, but they're the same kind of themes, right? A little bit crass, a little bit dirty, but not malevolent necessarily. That's just the way people were. And that's the culture that I was brought up in. Maybe a little bit crass, tells a dirty joke from time to time, definitely a lot of curse words flying in nearly every environment that I was in. I don't care if it was the more, country, farmer environment, or if it was in the more Mexican, American, down in SoCal, environment, whatever the case was, it was a little bit more laid back, non-traditional, not a lot of formality required. And I think that's one of the reasons why what we're existing in today is designed to the ridiculousness of the fake news cycle is in part designed to manipulate timelines perception-wise. And I think that the game is kind of up at some point because they're starting to realize that when some of us have been trying to point out this dynamic or speaking to within the timeline dynamic, those of us who take it seriously, it gives them the ability to sort of go like, not everything that we review when we look at a loop of a tape from 1999 or from 2010 or from whatever is accurate. It could be digitally manipulated. Then we watch it from the future looking back, not knowing that we're looking at either digitally manipulated footage with their like face swap, for example. That's one way it can be done. But also just entirely fictionalized news stories designed to spin people from another timeline into an outcome or to motivate them into manipulating timelines in ways that they normally would not if they did not think that actual event was happening.
does that make sense why the fake news cycle may be like a bigger thing? I'm sorry, it's a little esoteric for those of you who don't believe in timelines to grasp, but doesn't it make a little bit more sense why it's so important to fictionalize news aside from all the reasons I've typically offered? Is that once you get into timelines, then yeah, you're literally trying to change the lens through which people perceive the existing timeline. You want them to see it as having more menacing activities coming from, well, they're always trying to blame things on Russia. Why? Well, probably because something good's going to come from Russia. There's going to be decent and good benevolent information coming from Russia. So they, again, want to get back into this whole thing of like, oh, they're hacking, they're communists, they're doing this to us, blah, blah, blah. I ain't saying that there aren't Russian hackers, guys. There is. Of course, those things exist. And of course, they're going to do things to defend themselves the same way China has hackers and does things to defend themselves. What is legit or illegit within the defense things that are accusations that are floating around? Don't really have a clue there, guys, except to know that none of it could happen without some degree of knowledge and participation of certain labs, because everything leads back to central routes. You always get back to that, guys. I really don't understand why we even have to have that conversation. So, and I'm not going to right now. just saying. But let's talk about this thing a little bit more about structuring the reality that we want. I would say, number one, try not to damn these people that they're putting out all these negative stories about in every situation. Review it critically and ask yourself if the very organizations that are promoting narratives that are negative about some of these people aren't involved with these economies that they're pointing the finger at the others at. So some of these popular actors that I've seen that I never had menacing feelings about. I never thought they were occultists or involved with darker material. They just seemed like a normal person that had a lot of good luck. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. But I just don't think we should assign negative intention to all of the timeline things that went on within the film industry. And I'm going to raise an eyebrow at accusations towards actors and actresses that I think we're doing something good. Now, once you know that part of it, you also must know too that if you can promote in a belief in a person of a negative design of a great enough intensity to where the person themselves begins to adopt it or take it in a little bit or absorb it, then you're kind of programming the person into an outcome. You're going out of your way to do it. And so it's trying to give people that a little bit of a wake-up call into taking that into consideration. Like when you're taking in fake news cycles, even of the alt media design, some of them are really tempting because it's like, yeah, that's a famous actor. They must be an occultist. Yeah, down with the Illuminati. Get that trafficker. Okay, fine, guys, but is it always true? I mean, can you always trust that those storylines are true? Is it possible the traffickers are sometimes going, yeah, that person over there, don't look at us over here? Because most of the times they're really, I'm just telling you guys, it's kind of been working that way. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, when they say you're on the wrong side of history, I mean, yeah, that's a good point, because I keep thinking that a little bit, and I keep saying to people, like, what side of history do you want to be on? But again, we're kind of in this kind of thing relative to what is history. Yeah, people that are now able to, with dynamic timelines, decide what that's going to be by sending information back and forth and creating perceptions, right, based on footage. If somebody only sees a snippet of your day and you're behaving ironically, then that one snippet may look pretty bad. It's something you have to consider, guys. Manipulation of timelines, manipulation of data. I'm very ironic, I mean, like, it's again, like, and I hope they don't mind me doing this, but like, somebody that I've met even recently, we oftentimes say back and forth, we're too comfortable with each other because we talk pretty openly, like we've known each other much longer than we have, in ways that are humorous, but others on the outside may be horrified by. I don't mean, and it's not like it's anything horrible or anything, guys. It's a little bit like, you just have a unique sense of humor that you'll use amongst friends or people that you have an understanding with. And none of my humor is politically correct. It's oftentimes very dry and ironic, something that I've had to keep in mind, because sometimes somebody might be reviewing me from another timeline and go, did he say that?
Well, yeah, but I said it in the most 180 degrees from reality sense. I said it to be intentionally ironic. I've done that so many times, but I'll immediately tell you, like, yeah, but I just said that to be ironic. Don't take it seriously. But I wonder sometimes, what if somebody only saw me say that and then it got cut off at that moment and they didn't show the rest of the recording? Then somebody would be like, he just said something horrifying, you know? Because on a regular basis I might, just to be humorous. So I don't like losing my personality, because I think that the irony and all that is a big part of it. So I try not to lose that aspect, but I also have to remember that that's a reality, that timelines can be manipulated like that. Not everybody takes it into consideration. Like, here's all I'm going to tell you. And again, I'm saying this to all groups, whatever. If you're seeing this from another timeline, great. Then please remember this. If you're inspired to anger after they show you a snippet of something to say that somebody's bad, you may want to say, now can I see the rest of it? Don't snip it right at that point. Now I need to see the rest of what happened like 3 minutes after that for the rest of it. Oh, no, you don't need to see that. Yeah, ask them to see that, because they'll probably not want you to, because you'll probably see quickly that, and maybe in the future, guys, I'll talk about this in a second, but maybe they use irony less. Maybe sarcasm isn't as frequently used. There's a possibility. Why would that happen? Did you guys know that China, about 4 or 5 years ago, they put out some legislation? I got an article that I did a whole thing on, both on a blog, and I did a video article on it, where China has banned the use of sarcasm and irony by media organizations. And so they can't say anything within a headline or a news story that is intentionally ironic or sarcastic. So the way that we oftentimes will go like, yeah, the weather's really good outside, it's raining constantly. Well, the person obviously, when they say that, you hear my tone, it's raining constantly. Well, they don't like the rain. They don't want to go outside. So they don't actually mean the weather's great outside. They're being shitty about it. Whereas they might, if they're a person that likes rain, this is where it gets confusing. What if this person enjoys it and they say the same exact thing? Oh, I'd like to go outside. It's raining. Oh, I'd like to go outside. It's raining. Sure. I'd like to go outside. It's raining. Sure. Same exact phraseology. You say it different back. If it's text only, it could be interpreted both ways. Same thing with timelines when you don't give somebody the rest of the information. If you just cut it off and they're like, I saw them do that actually, by the way, guys. It was a tactic one of these social justice groups was using towards a person they were trying to target. They had the guy going like, what he was really saying was, when you played the whole clip, was, yeah, all right, guys, we're going to do something in honor of free speech. We're going to go out there and we're gonna kick the ass. We're gonna kick their ass. We're gonna kick some ass. And what he meant to say, and then after he followed it up, he said something like, he goes, and we're gonna really send a message that that freedom of speech is honored, and we're gonna send a wall of support. They didn't mean like they were gonna beat people up. They were just mean like, we're gonna just like spiritually, we're going to just kick some ass. It wasn't even like that. But somebody, like, they ended it at a certain point where you didn't hear the next minute of what he said to know that it wasn't physical. They just meant like, hey, we're gonna in the proverbially or whatever you want to say, kick some ass. It wasn't a literal thing. Okay. And so that's all I wanted to talk about, guys, as far as like this whole thing within timelines. I mean, if you're watching this from another one, again, I think that's, again, if you're in the future and this is something that no one's informed you about, you may want to think about this, that if you're not seeing the rest of it, you're not getting all the information. You may be completely missing the intention, especially amongst those of us who are super ironic, are really humorous and over the top about the way we use certain words, because we're trying to take the power out of them, guys. I'm wired that way. If those of you who spend personal time around me and everything like that, you'll learn that I throw around a lot of irony and sarcasm. I've tried to do it less around people that I don't know as well, because they don't always get it right away that's what I'm doing, and again, if it causes problems even on an individual level, again, I agree, it needs context always. So people don't always understand like what they're reviewing historically. Sometimes a person's being super ironic. I'm going to give you an example of this, guys. We used to have this dude that was
I don't want to say his name or anything like that, but I was in this office where we had a coworker that was just known to be a bit bigoted and prejudiced, right? And again, guys, I'm not talking about any like politically correct type shit. Even amongst those of us who like are very flippant about political correctness, even those of us were kind of like, man, that guy says some bigoted things. You know, those of us who are even more forgiving were thought like, oh no, you're making a mountain out of a molehill. This guy really said some shit, okay, that was pretty bad. And so and it was just randomly racist or randomly prejudiced for no good reason. Like he made these ridiculous observations that here's one classic one. I know this some coworkers will laugh when they hear this if they're listening, is that he made this observation that like, well, you know, with all this terrorist activity, it's a little bit concerning that nearly everybody on Interstate 5 that I see, I counted them, and easily 4 out of 5 are wearing turbans up and down I-5. Well, number one, like that had nothing to do really with what was going on in news. It was applying the turban to the wrong whatever, right? I mean, he was talking about dudes that were probably more from like northern India that were in trucking companies in America. And number one, on the route that he's talking about, they really aren't that voluminous. There isn't 4 out of 5 of them wearing turbans. So that was an exaggeration in and of itself that was stupid. So he would say things like this all the time, right? That were ridiculous and kind of overtly racist or sexist, to the point where it was funny. He became like a character to us. And so anytime we heard somebody saying something that we thought was offensive, but we didn't want to like point it out, we might text each other to be like, you know, well, of course, you know that 4 out of 5 of these people are wearing, you know, or we would say something like that was overtly racist or overtly sexist, relevant to that moment, in the same way that that person that was in our office did it, because that was our inside joke. Now, it occurred to me that this type of information is oftentimes played against people in the background, where somebody just takes it out of context, does present it to somebody and go like, you see all this racist shit this person's put, you see all this sexist things. It's like, no, you guys, that's not what that was. Like, are you shitting me? No, that was us making this joke back and forth about like somebody who's overtly racist by pretending to be like the guy. And in a private environment, that totally makes sense. But if you were to remove the context from that, it must have looked like we were all a bunch of flaming racists and sexists and all kinds of other ists and isms that we just absolutely were not. These are really nice people, caring people that actually were completely the opposite. And it was just their way of actually highlighting people who have that type of, you know, mentality. So it was actually quite brilliant the way it manifested itself within our group, you know, that's all. And so I'm just asking people to be realistic. Like, don't take every soundbite literal. Don't take every whatever things, whether you're in this current timeline, you're in another one or whatever. Just try to like reach out for more humor, reach out for more forgiveness, read the script back in your mind and ask yourself, even if you hear it placed within that context, like, could this person be ironic? Was the point of this to be sarcastic and ironic? Because then sometimes the absurd suddenly becomes funny. Then you don't have to be angry. You don't have to get drawn into the anger cycle. You don't have to get drawn into the trauma cycle. Okay. So guys, I've been on long enough today. I don't want to do this excessively for like a super long time. So I'm going to finish on that. I want to thank you very much for joining. Thank you for encouraging me to do certain content, some of you guys, really, because I think it is important to keep on this topic relevant to timelines, to remind people that, yeah, once you accept all the science of the universal plasma field, then we have to get into the, quote, cast of characters that understand how it bends, and to sometime realize that, yes, it is a cast of characters that's making the plasma field bend. And once you understand it, welcome to this theater, welcome to the stage. You may not be performing theater, you may not be a stage performer yourself, but you're amongst those who get it in that level, and they are going to interact with you whether you like it or not. So they're either going to pull you up on stage as a passive audience member going, hey, you get to be in the show. It might happen to you. And when it does, do something good with it. Program it into the positive intention. Find out what happens when you believe in somebody instead of get drawn towards cynicism. That's what I've learned to do. And more often than not, it's benefited me, and it's helped improve my life and the lives of others. So I'd like to end on that note. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you very much. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, everybody else. I do appreciate your comments, and have a good day.